The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell with you right through to 1 o'clock today. Loads to discuss, including the fact that Keir Starmer represented one of the suspects in the Bryce Norton sabotage, the RAF base. Those Palestine Action people, they're going to be a prescribed organisation from Monday. That's what the Home Secretary says. We're talking about the assisted dying vote as well. An MP is going to join us in a second. She's a shadow Foreign Office Minister. She voted against the assisted dying vote. We'll find out why. We'll debate that later in the programme, and whatever your view on that, we want to hear from you. Should people be allowed to die in the way that they want to? It's a big issue. Lots of social change this week on abortion, on assisted dying, whatever you want to talk about, you give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. We'll talk as well about my interview with the Prime Minister, a bit of controversy online. I'll address all of that later on in the programme. Also, whether a dozen ministers could quit due to the welfare reforms. That's the next big issue that we're going to be talking about. That's the next thing coming up in Parliament for Keir Starmer to battle. Lots to discuss in terms of the Middle East as well. Furious British people stuck in Israel, slamming the Foreign Office. Why haven't they got them out? We'll speak to Wendy Morton, who's former Foreign Office Minister, in just a second about what she would have done in those circumstances. Plenty to discuss. As I say, I want your views on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a WhatsApp voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk. Well, thank you so much for your company. As I say, so many different news stories to discuss. Give me your views on them. First of all, let's talk to Wendy Morton. She is a shadow Foreign Office Minister. She was a minister in the Foreign Office under the Conservatives. She's also the Conservative MP for Aldridge Brownhills. Wendy, good morning.
Morning, Peter.
Wendy, it's a huge day, loads to discuss. I want to get your views, first of all, as a former Foreign Office Minister, in regard to what you would do to get Israeli people who are in Israel out of Israel. We've heard from the Foreign Office and Foreign Secretary and Celebrity Mastermind contestant David Lammy that he says that the repatriation flight will be there when airspace is reopened. I mean, by that stage, people can get commercial flights anyway. We've been talking all week to various people, including our mutual friend Lee Scott, the former MP, who is stranded in Israel. What should the government do to get people back in the way that Germany, Bulgaria, other countries have done? They've sent cruise ships, they've sent flights. Why haven't we, do you think?
Well, look, I mean, it's really for the Foreign Secretary to answer, but what I would say this, Peter, is I appreciate, I acknowledge these are very difficult situations for any government to find themselves in, for any foreign minister to find themselves in. But at the end of the day, there are British nationals, British citizens that want to be repatriated home. So I have no doubt in my mind that that will be at the forefront of the Foreign Office's mind. They'll be working in very, very difficult situations, but I would urge them to use every influence, every contact, no stone must be left unturned. And I think, from my experience, one of the things that is often difficult for those who are involved, often for the families and the loved ones who are maybe in this country with relatives stuck in another place in conflict, is trying to understand what's going on. It's the communication that's really, really difficult. So I would urge Foreign Secretary and his team to leave no stone unturned and to, really double down on and do all that they absolutely can to get these people home.
We'll be checking in with Lee Scott a little bit later on to see how he and his family have.
Interesting to listen to him from what it is on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely, Wendy. More broadly, in regard to Iran, Israel, the United States, we've seen the Foreign Secretary in Geneva yesterday talking about all of this, trying to get some sort of resolution. What's your reading as a shadow foreign minister and also a former minister in the Foreign Office about what is actually happening and how close we are to something that could be very, very worrying? Or are we perhaps retreating from that a little bit now?
I mean, I remain really worried about the situation. I mean, it feels like there's so much going on in the geopolitical world at the moment, globally. But when it comes, and we just heard this morning that there were fresh attacks. So again, I urge the government to keep doing all that it can. It must do, use every tool in its armoury to seek to de-escalate that situation, because what we see is so much instability.
Is it possible to de-escalate it, Wendy? Is it possible to actually de-escalate? Because I think you must never give in these situations. You've got to keep working on it. But I just think our government really needs to keep working at this. There's also still an issue with getting humanitarian aid in. We've been calling for weeks and weeks for more to be done. And again, how can that aid be got to those people who so desperately need it? These are troubling times, but I think we've also got to really keep the pressure on when it comes to Iran as well, to keep the pressure on them to scale back any nuclear ambition they have as well. So it's a hugely complex situation, but the government have got to really keep focusing on this. Some of our viewers and listeners, and indeed some military commentators, are saying as well that actually Israel is doing the West's dirty work. It is attempting to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, so it can be a threat to not just Israel but the West as well. People keep talking about de-escalation, and that's fine, and that's a perfectly legitimate position, but others are saying, well, actually maybe the job needs to be finished here in a way that Hamas has been weakened, Hezbollah has been weakened. Surely the time has come, some would argue, for Iran to be weakened as much as it can be, and that we should actually be supporting this military action by Israel in a much greater way than we are. What would you say to that?
Look, I think I made really, really clear, the focus for me it's got to be on de-escalation. It's in nobody's interest for the situation to escalate. And so I will just keep pushing the government to use every bit of influence it has, working with its partners to seek de-escalation and to keep that real focus on trying to regain some stability across the region, ever mindful of the need to keep the pressure up on the scale back of nuclear. But we see the pictures. It's an appalling, it's a terrible situation.
Yes, it certainly is. I just wonder, in regard to that situation, whether you think a resolution will be found within Trump's 2-week deadline. I know all international efforts are being put into that to try to sort that out, and what you think the UK's role should be, because you're saying words and sentiments clearly that Keir Starmer has as well. I just wonder whether Trump or Netanyahu is actually listening to this country and listening to Keir Starmer.
Well, look, I don't have an insight into what either of those individuals are thinking, and I certainly don't have a crystal ball, Peter, and I'm not going to even try and speculate on this.
Okay.
And I think it's really important that we actually don't speculate.
Okay.
But the focus remains on trying to find a way to resolve this.
Sure.
But something needs to be done.
Okay, I want to just look back on what happened in Parliament yesterday. Wendy, I know you voted against the assisted dying bill. Let's just see what Kim Leadbeater has been saying about this in Parliament.
We are voting on an issue that matters deeply to our constituents. Yeah. Indeed, the issue before us today is very personal for many people, so many of our constituents, but many of us as well. It is an issue which transcends party politics, and I want to thank colleagues from across the House who have shared their very personal stories with me. And I'm grateful to all colleagues who have studied the detail of the bill. It is, of course, essential that we come to a decision based on the content of what it actually says. And I've been pleased to work with members on all sides of the debate to ensure that this legislation is something that Parliament can be proud of. A cogent, workable bill that has one simple thread running through it: the need to correct the profound injustices of the status quo and to offer a compassionate and safe choice to terminally ill people who want to make it.
Well, Kim Leadbeater's views on this clearly different from many others, including Wendy Morton. Let's just have a look at the moment the vote actually passed.
Ayes to the right 314. The noes to the left 291. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. And look! That completes third reading. If people who wish to leave now, please do so.
So a very tight vote, much tighter than it was in November. Wendy, can you just give me your reasoning as to why you voted against it, why you disagree with what Kim Leadbeater was saying there?
Yeah, so I followed this debate. We actually had a debate on this when I first came into Parliament 10 years ago, so it's right that Parliament debates it again. I know it's a very, very emotive issue, but for me, when I look through the legislation, at second reading, I didn't think it had the safeguards in that were needed. I didn't vote for it then.
That was in November, the second reading.
That was in November of this year, yeah, sorry. And then as it's gone through the Bill Committee, I've actually become less and less convinced that the legislation was even in a right place to pass to the House of Lords for further scrutiny. I would have liked it to have seen more scrutiny. Others will point to the numbers of sessions it's had in committee where the bill is looked at, but I sort of look back, and I spoke yesterday in Parliament and referenced other big bits of legislation similarly around things like abortion, where there was much more external independent scrutiny of that bill. It is an emotive subject, and it's so important that if this is going ahead, and the Commons have said it is right. It now remains to see what the House of Lords make of it. But for me, I couldn't vote for that piece of legislation. And we all have personal stories that favour both sides of the arguments. But as a legislator, as a member of Parliament, I think it's so important that we get the legislation right, so that when it does come into force, if it comes into force, it is in the best possible place. And that's the same for any piece of legislation, actually, but particularly something like this. No, it's been quite a week, actually, in Parliament.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Wendy, in that it is very emotive. There are lots of people who have very strong views on this. There are a number of issues, actually, including abortion this week as well, which have been free votes as well. So you can, of course, vote with your conscience rather than how your party's line on it per se. Although most Conservatives seem to have voted against this, I just wonder, in the change from November to now, the thing that we were told over and over again, and a real issue of concern for me was that, a High Court judge is going to be involved, there'll be proper safeguards, we've got some of the most, stringent safeguards there, and now the High Court judges aren't going to be involved at all either. It just seems to me, with the 300 amendments, some of which were debated, some of which weren't, to be a bit of a mess of legislation, really. I just wonder if you think there's any clarity, really, in terms of what will actually be there and what the Lords will debate now, and I wonder what your thoughts are on how they will scrutinise this.
Yeah, I mean, I can't preempt what the Lords will say, but I think it's worth just recognising and reflecting that it got through by just 23 votes, which is a big change from the vote in November. And a number of those people who were speaking against the bill, obviously I was one of them, referenced the lack of safeguards. You just mentioned that. Issues around the importance of getting this legislation right, because this is about the lives of some of the most vulnerable people. We talked yesterday about coercion. Mm-hmm. No one wants someone to feel that they were coerced into going down this route. I'd looked at some of the reports from some clinicians, and they'd set out certain steps that although they said their position was neutral, and I understand that there were certain tests that they wanted to see, the bill had met, and so I think there are still so many unanswered questions, and I just feel that it needs much more work on it. I do think there needs to be a conversation about it. I don't think it's uncomfortable to do, and this didn't have to be the end, even if it had been voted down. It could have been the start of more work and a conversation. But as it is, I really do worry about the bill. I mean, I've listened to a lot of constituents. Some have spoken to me. A lot of them have emailed me. My inbox has been quite lively for the last week on this topic, and understandably so, because people have some really, really strong views on this. Yes,
absolutely, including you, Wendy, and thank you for joining us this morning. Wendy Morton there, Shadow Foreign Minister, thank you for your contribution to the programme, and of course lots of people getting in touch on not just this issue but many others as well. Tracy in Wakefield says, "Morning Peter, the assisted dying bill terrifies me. I'm worried for our elderly or vulnerable who can be coerced to end their lives for financial gain. It's a law to cull the elderly to alleviate the demands on social care, in my view." Jane says, "My worry is now this assisted dying bill is further forward. Next step is taking money off disabled and vulnerable people. These people are already frightened about what's next. Some of them may feel assisted dying is the only way. This Parliament is so out of its depth, out of touch, and the worst one to deal with everything going on here and around the world." Penny in Essex says, "Good morning, Peter." Good morning, Penny. "Why is this assisted dying bill going to take until 2029 to actually become law?" It may be sooner than that, Penny. I'm not so sure. The Netherlands and several other countries seem to have got it right. Have we had talks with them? Yes, people being coerced could be a problem, but why are we the only country where it takes years? We feel constantly in everything. If any of those people in charge of this bill had watched someone die in agony, like my late husband, aged just 47, of cancer, and their mother, they might buck their ideas up and quickly," says Penny in Essex. Penny, I'm so sorry to hear about both those, both your husband and your mother there. That is a very, very difficult thing to have done, and of course you have strong views about it, and rightly so, and I totally appreciate that. I am a bit sceptical, I must say, of this legislation. I want them, if it goes ahead, I want it to be correct. Trevor says, "How come those who voted for abortion for a baby up to the point they're born are the very same people who are against the death penalty for terrorists and murdering paedophiles?" says Trevor in Harrow. That's a perfectly valid point. Andy's been in touch as well in regard to my interview with that disgraceful man, Sir Keir Starmer. He says, "You never laid a glove on him, maybe you were starstruck," says Andy. I certainly wasn't starstruck, let me tell you. I literally had 7.5 minutes. I wanted to get through as many questions as I could, Andy. I did some follow-ups. We'll watch it again, in fact, in a minute, and maybe if you missed it the first time round, you can judge. Maybe you'll come to Andy's conclusion, maybe you'll come to a different conclusion. We'll go to the debate desk next. We'll discuss assisted dying, the Middle East, and that Prime Minister interview. Stay with us here on Talk.
It's a very, very large airfield with fences all around the outside, and it's conceivable that they turned up, cut the fence and got in.
Well, that shouldn't be able to happen, though, should it?
Well, you'd like to think that it couldn't happen. Certainly during a war, you would want special forces nipping over the fence and doing worse.
No,
but what I would say with these guys, they're jolly lucky. Because there is lethal forces available. I mean, obviously not against people who aren't a lethal threat. But they should be very, very careful.
But it could happen.
It could if a mistake was made, yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is...
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has got in touch, including Alison, who says the new welfare reform bill is like a stab in my back. Anxious and frightened as to what they will do to me. Being extremely ill and disabled for 25 years is bad enough without worrying as to whether I can live. They took the £150 warm home discount from me, and now I cannot afford to use my stair lift. I have to sleep downstairs. I spent last winter with hypothermia as I couldn't afford to keep warm. I hope Starmer is happy with what he has done to people like me. At times I wish them bad luck in the hope they will appreciate that we are suffering. I don't deserve to be punished for being ill and disabled. If someone wants to swap places with me so I can have a life back, they're very welcome. Hugs, says Alison. Alison, I'm sending the hug right back. I'm so sorry to hear that you've gone through that, and I wish you well. I hope that things change and get better for you. I wish I could help you more than simply reading your message. I really appreciate that. There are a lot of very, very difficult circumstances out there, including Alison's, and hopefully we can be a voice for those people. Amanda says, it makes me livid when I hear people dictating their views on how, if ever necessary, my life should end. I believe everyone should be legally able to have their wishes recorded in a living will document, which would cover all aspects, says Amanda. Well, let's just remind ourselves about what Kim Leadbeater was saying, the MP who was putting forward this bill on assisted dying that has passed in the House of Commons yesterday. This is what Kim Leadbeater said.
We are voting on an issue that matters deeply to our constituents. Yeah. Indeed, the issue before us today is very personal for many people, so many of our constituents, but many of us as well. It is an issue which transcends party politics, and I want to thank colleagues from across the House who have shared their very personal stories with me. And I'm grateful to all colleagues who have studied the detail of the bill. It is, of course, essential that we come to a decision based on the content of what it actually says. And I've been pleased to work with members on all sides of the debate to ensure that this legislation is something that Parliament can be proud of. A cogent, workable bill that has one simple thread running through it: the need to correct the profound injustices of the status quo and to offer a compassionate and safe choice to terminally ill people.
Well, Sir James Cleverly, the former Foreign Secretary and Home Secretary, thought differently. He was one of the many Conservative MPs and some Labour MPs as well, MPs from various parties who voted against this. It's a free vote, of course. It's not a vote where they do what their party tells them to do. This is what Sir James Cleverly said.
This is an important moment, and whilst I respect the Honourable Lady, I disagree with her assessment that it is now or never, and it is this bill or no bill. Yeah. And that a vote against this at third reading is a vote to maintain the status quo. None of those things are true. Because this is such a fundamental change, we do need to make sure that we have that enhanced level of scrutiny about the detail of this bill. And I do not believe that, even though, like all of us, we want to avoid suffering and alleviate suffering wherever possible, I do not believe we've had the opportunity to get this bill into a right shape, which is why I will be opposing this third reading, and I encourage others to do likewise. Yeah.
Sir James Cleverly there. Well, this was the moment the bill passed yesterday afternoon.
Ayes to the right 314, the noes to the left 291, The ayes have it, the ayes have it, and look! That completes third reading. If people who wish to leave now, please do so.
Well, that now means that the bill on assisted dying is off to the House of Lords. They will scrutinise it and find out what they think about it. Let's scrutinise it here on the debate desk. James Bealby is with me, I'm delighted to say, the political commentator, also political strategist Peter Barnes with us. Hello, good morning to you both. Great to have you with us. Assisted dying, James, where do you stand on this?
I'm concerned about it, actually. I think the comments by James Cleverly were right. I think there are things that need to be looked at. Whether that will be done in the Lords or not is obviously open to question. But I've got concerns around some of the safeguards and the idea that people could be perhaps coerced into signing something that they don't necessarily want to. There's also the issue of people with so-called life-threatening diseases like anorexia. Obviously awful for those people who go through that, but it is something you are able to cover from.
There was a specific amendment on that as well.
Yeah,
certainly. It's not a terminal illness per se.
Absolutely, yeah. But also, you know, diagnoses can be wrong. People will be given, you know, 6 months to live and perhaps get better. So I think also there's a risk of people being, oh, I don't want to be a burden on my family, I'm going to sign this. So I think I would be sort of, if I was voting, if anyone would be foolish enough to vote me in as an MP, I would have voted against.
Well, I think it's really interesting, the points that you raised there, because there are lots of older people who really are fiercely independent, and rightly so. I'm sure I would be one of them in however long I have on this earth. If I get to the, you know, my 80s or 90s or whatever, I would imagine I wouldn't want to be a burden on other people. I wouldn't, and if this was an option, maybe I'd think, well, maybe it's time to go. And also in regard to the financial aspect of this, you know, people, I spoke to a solicitor about this a few months ago. He said people reveal themselves when it comes to wills, when it comes to inheritance, when it comes to care home fees, things like that, and that's what I worry about, because very few people will just make a decision on their own. Some will. There's some very strong-minded people who don't listen to anybody and they just do what they want to do. That's not everybody. People are influenced by their family, their friends, by what they read in the media, by what they talk about. They may not even be aware of it, and really I think there are going to be a lot of influences on this when it's available, and the problem is that, as we've seen in Canada, you know, this goes in a different direction. I'm worried about the slippery slope. What do you think, Peter?
I'm one of the biggest advocates of assisted dying, but this bill is an absolute monstrosity.
So you are an advocate of assisted dying?
Yes, but not this bill. This bill started off with at least tackling a few of the big problems that we've seen in other countries such as Canada, with this big kind of you know, people not having it as a free choice. You know, it was kind of built in with the legal structures with the judge. That got stripped out. It's now a panel. You know, there's nothing worse and more terrifying than a panel set by a government body. My lord.
And not involving a High Court judge?
Not involving any kind of proper kind of legal framework. That kind of added a structural, at least safeguard of a degree. But the thing that I don't like about this bill is the fact that it started off with the best of intentions and it's being voted on that, not what Kim just said, where it's with the contents of the bill. You know, that's what we really have to narrow in on. And what's really important is that this is not the first time this has ever come to the floor of the House of Commons. There's been 8 attempts since 1936, you know, and the last one in 21 did die in the House of Lords in the second reading. So it's not out of the realms of possibility that this is, you know, that it's even going to become law. But, you know, I'd look at there's also the fact that not so long ago, I think it was just on Thursday night, everyone was saying this was dead in the water and wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of different. Well, they thought they'd perhaps lost it. It's always hard to tell in regard to how different politicians vote.
There's been a complete lack of leadership on this issue.
A lack of leadership, James Fielder?
I think the way it's been introduced as a private member's bill is not the right way. If the government wanted to do this, they should have put it in the manifesto, allow people to vote.
Although an issue of conscience, they would say maybe a free vote is the right way to go.
A free vote as something that they put forward in the manifesto. Because when it goes to the Lords, the process won't have enough time to scrutinise the bill, put some of those safeguards in place. So I think it's, if they wanted to do it, Labour are obviously giving them parliamentary time to take this forward. Kim Ledbetter's had private time to put this bill that she's sponsoring forward. Perhaps Labour should have said it's a manifesto commitment, because then the Lords would have had more time to scrutinise.
But what I will say is Number 10 have been all over the place on this in terms of their supports. They've been hokey-cokeying it, basically. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They've been all over it. But also Kim Ledbetter, even her behaviour on this has been very suspect, because she's not been consistent. You know, there's a lot of words, a lot of warring words being
Well, time and time again, the High Court judge thing, I think, is worth thinking about just a little bit, because I know it was a few months ago, but she said over and over again, I saw her in literally dozens of interviews, where she said, we're going to have the greatest scrutiny, this is going to be something that we are going to have incredible scrutiny, where unlike many other countries, and that then went and said, oh, we'll just do a panel of medical experts.
Yeah, which, for no apparent reason. I don't understand why that was out. I don't really get.
Well, a lot of the
logic
High Court judges said we have enough to do. Actually, this isn't really for us. I mean, well, the legal system, as we know, James, is in serious trouble.
Yeah, exactly. It's ground to a halt. There's a massive backlog of cases. If they were having to hear these, pleas for assisted dying, I don't think that works. So I'm not in favour of it generally. But I think if we were to do it, having the High Court judge with all of the attendant difficulties would be a better way of doing it.
What do you think of all of this, of what James and Peter are saying, and what Kim Ledbetter and James Cleverly are saying as well? 0344 499 Drop me a voice note if you want to, or give me a ring. I can see the phones going at the moment. Neil has been in touch and says, I know a guy who was diagnosed with dementia at 55. He killed himself because he didn't want his family to suffer. He didn't want his perceived pride versus shame. Where's his line versus the state line? It's bad news. Robert Taylor in Nottingham says, I'm utterly appalled by the way Parliament has voted on assisted dying and abortion to term. In my opinion, this is legalised murder. What happened to Thou Shalt Not Kill? They were called commandments, not suggestions. A society where anything goes will eventually be gone. I despair, says Robert. And just one more before I go back to the debate desk panelist, Mary in County Down, who says, my late mum was terrified of getting cancer. She frequently said she hoped there would be legislative change that would allow her to avail of assisted dying immediately upon diagnosis. She was adamant she would never go through cancer treatment, despite knowing that many people who receive treatment make an excellent recovery and have years, many years, of a happy and productive life. I know this law in its current form wouldn't permit what my mum would have wanted, but I feel strongly that this is just the first step on a slippery slope to death on demand or by coercion. Yesterday was a very dark day. Our parliamentarians should be ashamed. They have let us down, says Mary in County Down. Peter, from your perspective, you say you're an advocate of assisted dying. What would a good, reasonable way of assisted dying, in your opinion, look like?
Basically, you have all the legal structures, you have all the safeguards possible, and more importantly, you actually make the bill, you have to reactivate it after, say, 5 years or 7 years. So it goes back to Parliament to decide, is it working? Is this what the people want? In the same way that the Coronavirus Act had to be kind of re-engaged, after so long. I think that would be a really good a way of measuring public support for it. But I'm coming around to the idea that actually this should go to a referendum, purely because it is such a huge cultural change to the nation that the public should be consulted. However, we have to make it very clear it is advisory, not binding. And I think that is what if anything was ever going to happen on that front.
Could you ever see yourself supporting that in that form that Peter talks about?
I don't think any government's ever going to do another referendum ever again.
Well,
After what happened in 2016,
yes.
I certainly wouldn't advocate that. I don't think that's the right way forward. Maybe in time with some different safeguards. I'm sure it'll happen inevitably and eventually. I just don't think this is right at this time.
OK, we'll go to a break now. We'll talk about many other things in a minute or two. But just before we do, let's read out just a couple more messages. Lots of people getting in touch about this, and we will take calls about this very, very soon. Dawn in Chelmsford says, morning Peter, we now live in a country where the old and young can be terminated, where nothing actually works properly, from huge capital projects to potholed roads. We are massively in debt and our government doesn't like us, says Dawn. Dave in South Gloucestershire says this is a colossal matter of assisted dying, affecting a fundamental issue like the value and sanctity of life. It seems to not give it the weight it deserves by leaving it to 600 odd MPs, and despite being a so-called free vote, some will vote along party political lines. The celebrations after were shameful. This should have been a referendum. Despite Ledbetter's flowery words, there is no doubt once this law is placed on the statute book, clever lawyers and judges will bring amendments, as happens to all laws, to circumvent the safeguards and become part of the statute. It happens every time. And just quickly, Ian in York has asked a question about parliamentary procedure. He says, after the Speaker says the ayes have it, he shouts something like, what is it? It sounds like a look. He says, unlock. So it is unlocking the doors. What happens is the doors are locked. It's an ancient parliamentary thing just to make sure that everybody's in and nobody can get in or out, or the vote can't be changed as soon as people go through those voting lobbies, and they do physically go through voting lobbies. You can visit Parliament, you can have a look at it, you can either pay your money to go in or you can get your MP to sponsor a trip, and I've done it myself. My parents have done it. I know lots of people. You're nodding your head, Peter. You've done the tour of Parliament. It's fascinating, isn't it?
I've given the tour many times.
You've given the tour, really?
And I took my parents in last year to Parliament. But it's also it's interesting how many phrases that we use, like toe the line, corridors of power, come from Parliament. It's in the bag. Is another parliamentary one as well.
And they're 2 sword lengths apart as well, and all the rest of it. Do you like all that ancient stuff?
Great to see the robing room where the king puts on the garments before the state opening of Parliament.
It's all marvellous and the best of British.
I recommend people do it.
Some of that stuff just hasn't changed in absolute centuries. I remember I was really lucky when I was a special advisor. I got a great seat for, because my boss's wife couldn't make it, and I got her seat for the state opening of Parliament, and it was brilliant. I love all that stuff. We just do it so well in this country, and sometimes I think perhaps some of our politicians don't quite raise themselves to the standards of Parliament that have been before. Yes, of course.
Very quickly, that actually I think Parliament has behaved rather well on this issue, better than I expected. Some not so much, but I do think the tone of this debate has been very sensible. There's been no hotheads. There's been no kind of radical, people going off on. I will say Diane Abbott gave an astounding speech. She was against the bill, but it was a very moving one, a very powerful one, and I think that kind of shows Diane Abbott at her best. And it is great to see the mother of Parliament really lead on the issue.
Do you agree with that, James Spielby?
I didn't watch the debate, but yeah, from what I've seen on the clips, I think that's probably true, yeah.
Okay, lots more to discuss on this. Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Plenty more to discuss, including that PM interview after the break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to the person who has messaged in to say this is the government of death. Neil says it'll be used and abused, and it's interesting. Brian says, I get so irate with policymakers who are frightened to try a policy to see how it works. We can change any policy if there are issues to get a system right. Suck it and see, says Brian. Let's get a first voice note of the programme from Brian in Hayes.
Good morning, Peter. Brian from Hayes here. Watching the MPs this week in Westminster, it seems that they want to kill the unborn. They want to kill the elderly. It's funny enough, they don't want to kill murderers. Thank you.
Brian, thanks for your thoughts there. Let's go to Aaron in Basildon. Aaron, what do you make of the assisted dying debate? What are your views on this?
My view is it's just too big. We need a referendum. Everyone's got to have a say in it. It can't just be 600 people in Parliament with their political views. Everyone's got to have a say because everyone's got family. Everyone's going to be put in a situation like this once in their life. And the other thing is, it's so important because you send to the NHS and the carers, rather than let people live, you've given them a choice. You've given them an option.
How would you vote yourself, Aaron? What would your view be?
Absolutely not. I don't know how I'm going to die. You don't know how you're going to die. So why give people the chance to know how they're going to die? That is one of life's great things. You know what I mean? It's like
But if you're in a horrendous situation, you've been given a 6-month prognosis, you've been told in the next 6 months you're almost certainly going to die in a medical opinion, and you know it's going to be grisly and horrible, surely some sort of opportunity to end your suffering before that suffering starts or before it gets intolerable is something that might be a good idea, might be an option people might want to go for.
Okay, my wife was told at the age of 12 she'd never get out of a wheelchair, right? And now she's a senior carer doing things, able-bodied, actually walking around. So at 12-year-olds, if you just listen to someone saying you've got 6 months to life, you've got to take them as their word. And yet sometimes they're going to get that wrong, Peter, because the NHS is not perfect.
Yeah,
You know,
and you're absolutely right, Aaron, and doctors are human beings and they make mistakes. I mean, a GP is someone who's trained but has 6 more years medical training than me. Rob in London says, I'm an oncology nurse, cancer nurse, and I fully support assisted dying. I've seen some terrible physical and psychological suffering in my job, and even with modern drugs, this doesn't always stop the pain and distress. However, I don't support this bill. It's got holes in it which are concerning. I don't believe this Labour government is competent in anything they touch, hence I worry terribly it will be a disaster and very dangerous, says Rob in London. Rob, thank you for that. I appreciate that. You know of what you speak, and actually it's really interesting. We were talking in the break slightly. I have experienced when I was younger, 2 of my really good friends at school, I mean this is going back 20 years longer, 2 of my really good friends at school, both their mothers died of cancer. When the second instance I was very close to this person. I saw my friend's mother. I was in the house when she died actually, and it was horrendous, and we knew it was going to happen for months, and I really wrestle with this issue. I'm not sure it's entirely settled in my mind actually. Chris says, I'm a learning disability nurse. I am very worried about the use of this bill and the risk of coercion. Yeah, let's get to that, Peter. I also worry for the mental well-being of the clinicians that are expected to carry out assisted death. It may result in mental health deterioration of the clinicians involved. No one wants to do that task, Peter.
Yeah, the risk to the disabled community, for want of a much better phrase, is very significant because there could be an increase in people reaching to in their life because of all the pressures on the system. Because let's be honest, most of the systems are broke. There is not really much of a choice for some people. You know, we look at palliative care. Most of it's done by charities, and it's holding on for dear life. It is absolutely ridiculous that we do not care for people at the end of their life who are suffering. But I will say there is a difference between living and existing. There are some people that are bedbound that will not get better. I go back to one of the callers then, Ari's talking about his wife. Not everybody is his wife. Not everybody survives. And sometimes, 6 months is 6 months. And I think we have to be very realistic about that. We're not mature enough as a nation to have that debate yet.
Final thought from James Bealby.
I mean, I think, that's absolutely right. But I don't think that's a problem with this bill. I think that's the general existential problem with this debate. You've got doctors offering people a choice of either, you can take this care, or, by the way, you can sign this bit of paper and maybe we can go down another route. If you're a clinician, you don't want to necessarily do that. You go into the medical profession.
First, do no harm.
Exactly, absolutely. And I think coercion is really difficult. So while the bill could be tidied up, I still think there's a fundamental issue there.
What do you think about this? We're going to talk about this more later in the programme. 0344 499 1000. Steve says, Mr Barnes is spot on. A referendum is what is required on the assisted dying bill. Far too many unscrupulous people will take advantage of this. Peter, I am elderly. I have a number of painful chronic illnesses. I have a good family, but I would use assisted death as I do not want to live in Starmer's hell anymore. Stuart in Perthshire says, I've been thinking so much about all the people, particularly MPs, who care so much about human life, or so they claim, yet no one cares about the homeless who die of exposure each winter, or the elderly who can't afford to heat their homes. I'm getting a strong whiff of something here. I'm not sure what it is. Oh yes, I know that smell. It's hypocrisy, says Stuart in Perthshire. Lots more to discuss on this. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're also going to play the interview of the Prime Minister did on Thursday and get your reaction to that. Stay with us here on Talk.
For me, it's quite straightforward. I would simply deport him. I don't think...
I'd just put him on a dinghy and send him out into the channel.
I'd send him straight back to wherever he's from.
But we can't. Legally not. We can't fly him back to Afghanistan. They won't have him back.
Well, if those people won't accept him, then we cut off all foreign aid until they start to behave sensibly, because we can't have people here who don't respect our culture, don't respect our laws, and actually damage our own way of life. I think the British people have had enough of it now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the reunion of the century is just around the corner. We're giving you a chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets in Manchester on the 19th of July. Oasis Live 25 is sold out, but Talk can get you in. That's not all. Alongside the tickets, we're going to put you up for a night in a hotel, put $5,000 in your back pocket, completely tax-free. Listen up right now for everything you need to know on how to enter our competition.
Alright, kid, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and $5,000 spending money, all you gotta do is text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Sorted. Right, here's all the legal stuff. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You've got to have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com.
Peter, I think you have tickets yourself to Oasis.
Yeah, I do.
You're around first time round.
Oh, trust me, a lot of work was taken to get those tickets by a lot of people. We had like teams of people. Like,
really?
Yeah. That's how. Because I remember actually being on talking about the hunt for these tickets and everything, and you know the scams and all the rest of it. But yeah, that's what it seems to be now. To get any kind of tickets for big gigs or major shows, you've got to work in as a group. Yeah. To kind of get.
Well, or just enter our competition.
Yeah.
We will. I mean, the hottest ticket in town, of course, was the train to Staffordshire this week to interview Keir Starmer. I managed to have a chat with him in the kitchen of a woman called Nicola. Now, there's some nonsense, absolute untrue nonsense about this online, that she's an actress. It's not true. She is a mother of 3, I think. I think she works in education. She is going to be the beneficiary of one of the new government policies about warm homes. I did ask the Prime Minister about this policy a little bit, but of course there are loads of other things I wanted to ask him about immigration, about grooming gangs, more accurately rape gangs, loads of different things. I only had a short period of time, but in the time that I had, the 7 minutes or so, this is what I asked the Prime Minister earlier this week. You have proven you can act quickly and decisively when you want to. You recalled Parliament, you put through legislation in a day in regard to the Scunthorpe blast furnace. You directed the police and the courts in regard to the rioters last summer. Why not direct the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, which you used to lead, today to prioritise catching gang members who have raped children? Start solving this today instead of waiting for an inquiry.
Great challenge, and that is exactly what we've done.
How much more money have you given?
So the spending review puts more money towards policing, but the instruction is absolutely clear to go after these vile criminals. I've long said, I mean, grooming is an awful crime. I prosecuted the first case best part of 15 years ago. The first time there was a grooming case in our court, I took the decision to prosecute. But I know from talking to victims the impact it has. I've always said the first port of call should be a criminal investigation. Yes, there will now be a national inquiry. There has to be accountability. But for victims and survivors, the most important thing is there's a criminal investigation where there can be, and where perpetrators are convicted, they then go to prison. And that is by far the best and most important way of dealing with this vile offence.
Do you regret being against an inquiry? You said some of the people calling it were jumping on a right-wing bandwagon. Are you going to apologise for that?
Well, the people I was referring to, and I made this absolutely clear when I said it, were the politicians who had been in power and done absolutely nothing. And then as soon as they're out of power, are screaming and shouting. So Kemi Badenoch, Chris Philp, those individuals, when they were in power, did absolutely nothing. Now, I've been campaigning and working on this for 15 years, and have as many other people. Initially, we were looking at local inquiries, but I asked Louise Casey to just do an audit to assure me there wasn't more that we could do. She's done that. She's written that up. It's a pretty long report. I've read every single word of it. She's recommended a national inquiry. I accept her recommendation. That'll be a statutory inquiry and we'll get on with it. It runs alongside the criminal investigation, by the way. It's very important. It's not one or the other, because the first route should always be the criminal route, in my view, because where we've got perpetrators that are convicted, they should be in prison.
Over 40,000 illegal migrants have arrived in small boats since you've been Prime Minister. It's the worst year on record. Your approach just isn't working, is it?
We're, absolutely serious about the response to what is a serious problem. In the end, the way to deal with this is to bring down the gangs that are running this trade, and it is a trade. They're making huge amounts of money. That's why we are increasing law enforcement powers. There's a bill going through Parliament which will give counter-terrorism powers to our law enforcement, the ability to get in much earlier. We're working with international partners. I raised this in my discussions with the French president when I saw him earlier this week, with the Chancellor in Germany, with the Prime Minister of Italy, because we've got to come down even harder on these gangs. We're determined to do so. I know we've got to do more. That's why I'm working with our partners to do that, particularly in relation to law enforcement in the north of France. And that I raised directly with the French president. We're working together on this. But we are absolutely determined, with the extra powers to our law enforcement, working with our partners, and then importantly, where people do come to the country who aren't entitled to be here, processing their claims and then returning them to where they came from. And since we've been in power, 30,000 people who've no right to be in the United Kingdom have now been removed from the United Kingdom because we're processing the claims. It's the highest number for the best part of 10 years. But I accept the challenge. There's more that we've got to do.
Are you going to back President Trump if he goes to war with Iran?
Well, it's a fast-moving situation in the Middle East. I share the concern about the nuclear program of Iran. I absolutely clear in my mind that Israel has the right to self-defense. I do think that we need to de-escalate the situation. There's a huge risk now of escalation across the region. I'm talking to regional leaders on a daily basis. They're very concerned about escalation. It could spill very easily into Gaza, which is already an intolerable situation. And obviously it's having an impact on the economy. So I'm clear in all of my discussions, we need to de-escalate this. Yes, deal with that nuclear program, but de-escalate and deal with it, as was the case, in recent weeks, with negotiations and an outcome that is a diplomatic outcome.
Prime Minister, you say what you're announcing today will help people such as families here in Staffordshire save £150 on their bills, with energy bills some of the highest in the world here in the UK. Is your policy of net zero actually just storing up price rises and energy insecurity for the future?
No, complete opposite. What we've seen is that particularly conflict adds to our energy prices. So energy prices have gone up. They're 40% higher than they were at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The reason they've gone up is because we're on the international market, the fossil fuel market, and therefore we're impacted by the actions of others in conflict. So the long-term aim here and intention is go to renewables, which are cheaper, we have control over them, security, and therefore we're not affected when there's international conflict. But in the meantime, what I recognise and what today is all about is that this winter, next winter, people need help with their bills. And that's why we're rolling out now for nearly 6 million households, so many more people, but 6 million households, £150 off your energy bill this winter. And we're in Nicola's kitchen here. She's training to be a teaching assistant. She's working hard. She's on UC, but having £150 towards her energy bill, she tells me, will make the big difference to her, really get her through the winter for the energy bill. She's got 3 young children. That's not an untypical case. So I'm really pleased that we can make that announcement today. And for many, many families, when I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of money and we struggled to pay our bills. I actually know what it feels like to fear the postman coming with a bill. Nicola, equally now, not the postman, but she's got a smart meter. She knows this is going to make a material difference to her. And politics is about who do you have in your mind's eye when you make decisions. And it's hardworking people like Nicola who will be helped by this £150 off your bill this winter.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for speaking to Talk.
Thank you.
Right then, Peter Barnes, what do you make of what the Prime Minister said there?
A series of lies, misinformation and complete claptrap. Pretty much on every single point he made. Most of what he said is categorically untrue or is partially the truth. I mean, take the last point he's just made. The 150 quid would bring bills back down to where they would have been. What he hasn't mentioned is we're sat on 150 years worth of shale gas. You want to talk about energy security?
Some of the highest energy bills in
the
this
world.
Country, yeah.
In the world at the moment. It is absolutely staggering.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. Let's talk about the fact he said removed and not deported, because let's not forget that they were asked and given money to go.
They're clever with their language and all of that. 100%. If I had more time, I would have challenged them on that, but there are a lot of removals. Yeah.
The really big one is on the international stuff. Keir Starmer is a complete irrelevancy to everything that is happening right now, and that means Britain is irrelevant on the world stage. He has been pushed out by the US and by Israel because he is not trusted.
Do you agree with that analysis, James?
Not particularly, no. I think it's quite a strong analysis from Peter. I think Starmer, there's been some major challenges with Starmer's performance as PM. I think on the international stage, that's one of the things where he has been successful. On energy, yes, bills are too high. The announcement of the new Sizewell will mean, albeit a long time in the future, electricity bills will come down and we will have a sustainable energy for the future, something that should have happened 10, 15 years ago, and we're paying the price for that now.
On the gangs, one thing I did ask him a couple of questions and press him on this, was specifically in regard to the Home Office and police services prioritising rape gangs, dealing with that in tandem with an inquiry. He said that was happening. Do you have confidence in that?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think we've come so far down this road now, and there's been so much talk about this over the last 10, 15 years. I don't think they've got any alternative but to do that.
But that's the point, is it's no alternative. The only reason this is now a conversation is Baroness Casey went in front of the Home Affairs Select Committee and said there is a direct link. You know, her evidence was undeniable, and it's made a lot of the Labour rhetoric around this stuff very dodgy in the eyes of the public, and it is a matter of trust that they are nowhere on, in my opinion.
I think she's done a very good job of depoliticising it and saying this is a major issue which we need to address. Otherwise there was a risk of it saying, oh, that's a political dog whistle issue. Louise Casey has taken all of the heat out of this, and now we can move forward.
Okay, thank you both very, very much for being on the debate desk today. That's James Bealby and Peter Barnes, political commentators. Both thank you to them. Thank you to you as well. Penny says that Starmer is unbelievable. Peter, you did well, but he's just a compulsive liar, says Penny in Essex. Thank you for all your opinions. We'll get to more of them in the next hour. We'll also talk about assisted dying, the main issue you want to talk about today, because we're going to be speaking to Dr. Gordon MacDonald, who's the Chief Executive of Care Not Killing, and Jackie Davis, who is the Chair of Healthcare Professionals for Assisted Dying. Lots to discuss in all of that. We'll make sure you have your say as well. Give me a shout. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, or indeed send your voice note too. Stay with us here on Talk.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr.
are not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. We're talking about assisted dying this morning. It's gone through the House of Commons. What will the Lords say about it? The House of Lords, they're debating it as well, as are we. Dr. Gordon MacDonald from Care Not Killing is going to be with us in a second, as is Jackie Davis from Healthcare Professionals for Assisted Dying. They're going to debate. What do you think of this issue? Give me a shout. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll also be talking about the mastermind of Australia's successful small boats crackdown, urging Keir Starmer to resurrect the Rwanda plan. Do you think it should be resurrected? Would it have worked had it gone ahead? Certainly many of the Conservatives, including Rishi Sunak, were fearful that human rights legislation would be used to ensure that it didn't work. What are your thoughts on all of this? And indeed, everything we're talking about today. The Prime Minister interview we just played out there again. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note. We've had some of those this morning already. 0344 499 1000. That number can be used to send me WhatsApp text messages, and you can of course give me a ring on that number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, lots of reaction to the Keir Starmer interview. James says, being from the East End, I know a con man when I see one that certainly Starmer fits the bill in James's opinion. This person says, I love your interview with two-tier Keir. Bizarrely, I think he actually believes he is doing a great job. I'm sure his nose was getting longer than Pinocchio's as he spoke, says Dawn. Sorry, Peter, I had to turn around off when Starmer was talking. Well, I hope you turned it up when I was talking. Lots of other people getting in touch as well about assisted dying. We'll talk about that more in a second. Another person has texted and says, apparently the woman in your interview with Starmer was actually an actress and the whole thing was staged. No, that is misinformation. It's false. That has been on social media. It is not true. She's not an actress. I met her. She is someone who owns that house. She's a single mother. She's training, as Starmer said, to be a teaching assistant. Someone put up on social media that she was an actress, and with a photograph beside which wasn't her, didn't even look very much like her at all. That is false. And listen, what happens, I worked in politics for 3.5 years, when a Prime Minister wants to go somewhere, obviously they select people they're going to talk to. This woman was a constituent of Jacob Collier, who is the MP for that area of Staffordshire, a village called Rochester, I think it's called. It's outside Uttoxeter. Anyway, I know that area a little bit because I used to work for BBC Radio Derby way back in the day. And of course, number 10, the visits team, set up this, well, not set up, but established the contact with this woman who was a constituent of Jacob Collier. The Prime Minister went to meet her, talked to her, lots of different media did interviews there. This is absolutely exactly what happens with loads of politicians from all parties. I did it when I was in the Conservative Party, Labour did it, and Number 10 did it on Thursday. The Prime Minister goes in, loads of media are there, they do lots of different interviews, really straightforward. The kitchen was where we were told to do it. We set up our cameras, I interviewed the Prime Minister, I had 6 minutes, managed to stretch it out to 7.5. That was the interview that ensued. So there's loads of nonsense on social media, and if you look at my social media at Peter Cardwell, I've absolutely clarified all those points. Thank you to Jacqueline, who says, I can't stand Keir Starmer's voice anymore. The real problem in this country today is hope. We have no hope. We are not in a class war or a war of skin colour. We are in a religious war. Muslims are winning thanks to our government. Well, Jacqueline, I would say not Muslims, but Islamists, people who are very radical Muslims. There are a lot of peaceful Muslims. Why did you not mention being the most expensive for energy bills in the world, says Glenn. I literally said that a few minutes ago. Glenn, maybe you missed it. Another person says, I've got another question about the Starmer interview. How was that particular house and particular woman selected by Number 10 in the Labour Party? Well, I've just said a second ago that Jacob Collier is the MP, the Labour MP for that region. He helped the woman with her benefits, and then he was asked, can you find somebody for the Prime Minister to visit her home? That was then, the Prime Minister was then brought to that house, and the interviews ensued there. So happy to clear that up. And Michael says, you stood there, Peter, and let Starmer gaslight you and the public by blaming everyone else for the Labour's grooming gang debacle. I thought you were a serious journalist. Well, I did challenge him on that, and I asked him a number of questions, a couple of questions about it out of the 5 or so that I was given. I would love to sit Keir Starmer down and do a war interview. I would love to do that. It's probably not going to happen. I would love it to happen. Maybe I'll get to interview him again. You can't get everything in the interview. You can't please everybody. I'm going to stop apologising for it now because I did the job, and there we are. Thank you to Angela as well, who says it is her cat's birthday. Her husband's birthday, and she sent me a picture of her cat, and she's looking forward to the weekend shows. Well, thank you for that as well. And also, Peter Barnes summed up the interview with Starmer perfectly. It says, Leslie, on assisted dying, loads of people getting in touch, including Alex and Stratf in London. He says, regarding assisted dying, why can't there be a register, like a blood donor register, and those that do not agree with the register, so it can never happen to them? And Anthony says, why all the fuss? This bill doesn't go far enough. Just do the same as Switzerland, says Anthony. Well, let's have a debate now with Jackie Davis, who is the chairwoman of Healthcare Professionals for Assisted Suicide, and the Chief Executive of Care Not Killing, Dr. Gordon MacDonald. They're both with me. Jackie, some people said some of the celebrations yesterday were perhaps a bit unseemly in regard to the content of this bill, but you must be at least relieved that it has gone through the House of Commons. What are your reasons for thinking it is a good thing?
Yes, people were very relieved that it went through, including myself. And I don't think it was unreasonable to expect us to celebrate getting a piece of legislation that we have fought for over a decade now. So I'm sorry to hear those comments. My reasons for it is I've been a doctor for a long time. I know that bad deaths occur in this country every day. I'm sure most of your listeners will have an experience of a bad death in their family. Palliative care can't help everybody at the end of life. We know that. Over 600 people a year take their own lives behind closed doors, or faced with terminal illness. And that's a terrible way to go for the patient and their family. And dozens of people, if they've got £15,000, go to Dignitas. It doesn't have to be like this. We know that. Over 300 million people around the world now have access to assisted dying, most of them under the same legislation that is proposed here. It works. I've spoken to people from Australia, New Zealand, California, Oregon, where it's been going for 25 years. They never reverse the law because it works, and the things that people are reasonably concerned about simply don't happen. So I'm very pleased it's gone through. Okay,
Dr. Gordon MacDonald, listening to that, Chief Executive of Care Not Killing, what do you make of what Jackie Davis has said there?
Well, I mean, Jackie obviously is involved with dignity in dying, and she's recounted all the dignity in dying lines, but the more you look into this, the more you find that actually it doesn't stand up. And, you know, in Oregon, the law has expanded. People who are depressed get help to end their lives. Only 1% of them get referred for psychiatric evaluation. You know, people feeling a burden are given assistance to end their life. You know, yesterday in Parliament, Kim Leadbeater and those who were supporting her voted down a new clause 16, which would have prevented people who were asking for this just because they felt a burden or because they were depressed from being given access to it. And that, I think, shows that ultimately, for the campaigners for this is not about protecting the vulnerable. It's just about allowing people who want this.
Not protecting the vulnerable, Jackie?
I don't know where to start. There is no evidence from abroad that vulnerable people are affected by this. And this would be the most safeguarded bill in the entire world. People would have to go before a panel of that included psychiatrists who would assess depression, and certainly if they thought that depression was your reason for applying for citizenship, you wouldn't get it. You'd have a social worker there to assess for coercion, and the psychiatrist also assessing for capacity. You'd have a legal person there. This would be the most safeguarded bill in the world. And if people won't accept this bill, there was a fashion yesterday in the House of Commons for saying, well, of course I agree with assisted dying, but not this bill. That's the new line from our opponents. If you won't accept this bill, you won't accept any bill, because this has got more safeguards in it than anyone else. And I think what people want is to put so many safeguards in that you can't actually get an assisted death. If you go and talk to people from Australia, where the same legislation has been going now for several years, they will absolutely say there's none of these things happen. People with psychiatric illnesses, vulnerable people, it just isn't an issue. I understand the concerns. Why don't people like my colleague go and talk to people who are actually doing this and get reassurance from them? Because what at the moment we've got is a lot of what ifs, and I don't hear from him what he's offering 600 people who take their lives every year.
Well, let's find out. Let's ask him. Gordon, what do you make of the points that Jackie made there? What are you offering, and what alternatives are there to those people who feel that they need to end their own lives?
Jackie just denies everything that's put to her.
Let's put the points to you, and then you can put the points to her. So you make your points first.
We had Alicia Duncan from Canada over, whose mother was euthanized. She was allowed out of a psychiatric unit 4 hours later. Doctors agreed to kill her.
I interviewed her. I interviewed the daughter. Yeah, I remember that.
And it's a horrific case.
But why do you think that would happen here in the UK?
Because depression is not prohibited as a.
It's not a terminal illness, though, is it?
Well, yeah, it's terminal illness, but then how do you define terminal illness? If you take the anorexia situation, Alicia's mother had been starving herself. If you take anorexia or people who are self-starving, they have a physical.
But the legislation, like what happened to Alicia's mother, absolutely dreadful. I don't support that at all. But what I would say is that there's no suggestion that this legislation would allow that to happen, is there?
Well, Alicia thinks there is. She wrote to MP to tell them that she thought that both Kim's bill and the bill in Scotland would allow that to happen. So, I accept she's saying, and she's looked into it in great detail. So,
are you familiar with this particular case, Jackie? I don't want to ambush you with this, but are you familiar with this particular case? I'm not familiar with the.
Sorry. I'm not familiar with the case, but I think it's a really important point to make that Canada has a completely different legislation from us for reasons that are a bit nerdish. It's to do with the fact that their Supreme Court can tell their Parliament what to do, and so they have expanded the criteria for assisted dying, and it is something that couldn't happen in this country.
Well, that's nonsense. That is absolute nonsense.
I'm sorry, Gordon. Don't just interrupt me while I'm thinking and say that's nonsense. That's not appropriate. Wait a minute.
Hold on. One at a time. Hold on. One at a time, please. Jackie first, then Gordon.
I've lost my thread now. Outrageous behaviour on your part, I'm afraid. People who talk about Canada know that we're comparing apples and oranges here, and that it would not happen here because our Supreme Court cannot tell us. And the Select Committee looking at assisted dying abroad said that every legislation that has the same setup, every jurisdiction has the same setup as we do, as we would have if this goes through. There has been no slippery slope, there's been no expansion of the criteria, and it simply wouldn't. When people start talking about Canada, they can't make the case against the places that are actually already doing what we would be doing.
Gordon?
The Scottish Parliament Health Committee looked into this with the Scottish Bill, and it's not that dissimilar from Kim's Bill at Westminster. And you've got to remember that 9 of the 10 members of the Scottish Parliament Health Committee voted for the bill, and they concluded that there was a risk that the courts the court cases would be brought, and that there would be expansion of the law as a result of that. So for Jackie to say that it's just not going to happen is just nonsense, because we have human rights, the European Convention of Human Rights, and it's not that dissimilar from the grounds which were used in Canada.
What happens now, Gordon, because you've essentially lost your campaign, haven't you?
No, not at all, because this has a long way to go. We're actually only at half-time, if you think about it in football terms. It's been through the Commons, obviously, the majority was reduced. The more
Still went through.
The less they were keen on it. And, you know, we'll see what happens in the House of Lords, but we know that there's a long way to go yet. And when it comes to trying to actually implement such a bill, the devil is in the detail, because the government recognised that, and that's why Kim had to postpone the implementation for 4 years, because the government knew that trying to implement this system that was being proposed was a bit of a nightmare.
Jackie, you look as if you might be about to spontaneously combust. How would you like to respond to what Gordon says?
It would be the first time on radio, I'm sure. But, you know, I keep coming back to the same fact. People are doing this abroad. Many jurisdictions have this legislation. Are we really saying that we can't do what other people are already doing successfully? And if we don't do it...
But there are real worries about this. There are real worries about this, Jackie. There are real concerns from people who think that people will be coerced, that people will worry about things like the care home fees, that those will be uppermost in people's minds, when actually it won't be about the pure motives that you ascribe to many people.
Again, I come back to learning from what's going on abroad, and there's been no evidence of anything like that. And the only, you know, I had a recent conversation with people from Australia who are involved in this. The only coercion they have seen since they started this several years ago is families coercing their loved ones to have an assisted death, taking them out of institutions while they're dying, where they might have an assisted death, and putting them in institutions where they can't have one. So that's the only coercion. I agree that it's absolutely important to get this right, but we're not inventing the wheel here. We're not the first people to do this. We can talk to our colleagues from abroad. We can find out how they're doing it, because they're doing it without all the problems that are reasonably anticipated. I absolutely, you know, it's a huge societal change if we get it. But we have to take lessons from abroad and not have a lot of what-ifs that aren't actually going to happen, while we're not offering to those people who are already suffering, that burden of suffering we know about, bad deaths that palliative care can't help, people taking their own lives, like my own brother did, behind closed doors. We need to deal with that.
I'm so sorry to hear about your brother, by the way. Jackie, can you tell me, just on this particular position about High Court judges, do you accept that the position of your camp, well, your side of the argument, let's say, was weakened when Kim Leadbeater said over and over again that High Court judges would make a decision on this? Now they're not going to, and actually her case was weakened as a result of that.
No, I really don't, because you've got 3 experts to talk to these patients at the end.
But we were told that was the case, that was going to be the case. And just because we don't follow the laws of other countries, we're the UK, we can make our own laws to suit our own people, can't we?
We can. You see, in a sense, she's damned if she does and she's damned if she doesn't.
But she said it in the first place. She said that this was going to be a real safeguard, that we're going to have the best safeguards in the world, and then that disappeared.
Well, it didn't disappear. It got replaced with something else. So
well, it did disappear.
Yeah, but I think I've heard a lot of headlines about this, and that went. And importantly, it was replaced with a lawyer, a social worker, and a psychiatrist to cover coercion, capacity, and the legal aspects.
Gordon, would you be happier, Gordon, if there was a High Court judge involved with this? Would that give you any sort of comfort whatsoever?
Well, the thing about the High Court judge was that it would be somebody who would be impartial and wouldn't be someone who was already signed up in principle to the cause. You know, the lawyer, the psychiatrist and the social worker are all going to be people who believe in helping people to end their lives through assisted suicide. They're not going to be people who have concerns about it, who will sign up to these panels. And in any case, as the Royal College of Psychiatrists and the social workers have said, there are not enough psychiatrists and social workers to actually meet the current caseload, and never mind do this on top of it. So how they think that this is going to actually be implementable, I do not know, because all that's going to happen is that people who have got serious mental health problems will not be getting the treatment they need, and people who are at risk will not be getting the social work protection they need, because social workers and psychiatrists will be diverted off to run these panels.
Okay, thank you both very much. That is Dr. Gordon MacDonald, the Chief Executive of Care Not Killing, and Jackie Davis, who's the Chairwoman of Healthcare Professionals for Assisted Dying. Thank you both for discussing that with us. Benny in Belfast says, we are the UK. We don't follow the laws of other countries. We make our own to suit our own people. This obsession with other countries is ridiculous. We voted for Brexit to decide our own direction, and also if Jackie can't handle challenge, maybe her position is weak, says Benny. Jane says, didn't the government in Canada freeze bank accounts of truckers because they wouldn't take a job? So not sure Canada should be a leader in anything. Jane, I totally agree with you. And I mean, Mark Carney is slightly better than the floppy-haired fascist himself, but with the silly socks and the ludicrous attitudes. I saw a picture of him recently, actually, Justin Trudeau there, although I wasn't quite sure it was him because he didn't have black face. But Jane, really good point there. And actually, do we want to follow the Canadians? Especially, look, I've had all my jobs, I've had all my updates, I've had all the boosters and all the rest of it. I'm immunosuppressed. I have a very tedious illness I won't go into, but I've got to have all my jobs. I've had them all. Happy to have them. Happy to have more as time goes on. People aren't. Some people are, some people aren't. But your body is your own. You make your own choice based on your own decision. And if Canada froze the bank accounts of those truckers, which they did, absolutely disgraceful from the alleged Liberal Justin Trudeau, who is clearly not a Liberal. Well, he's someone who has been disgraceful and has overseen a lot of what has happened with assisted dying. I think there are lessons to be learned from other countries, definitely, but perhaps how not to do things. And certainly Canada's example in all of this isn't something that I agree with. We'll get your thoughts on all of this in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
For me, it's quite straightforward. I would simply deport him. I don't think.
I just put him on a dinghy and send him out into the channel.
I'd send him straight back to wherever he's from.
Well, we can't. Legally, we can't. We can't fly him back to Afghanistan. They won't have him back.
Well, if those people won't accept them, then we cut off all foreign aid until they start to behave sensibly, because we can't have people here who don't respect our culture, don't respect our laws, and actually damage our own way of life. I think the British people have had enough of it now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Nick who says, you had 7 minutes with Starmer, it didn't help the person you were talking to has the personality of a mouldy potato, says Nick. Shane says, you mentioned your parliament in the UK. I haven't visited our parliament down here in Canberra since I was a kid. I must visit there one day. Another top show, thanks, says Shane in Sydney. Shane gets in touch every now and again. He watches us in his evening or morning in Sydney. In regard to assisted dying, Samantha says, the main driving force behind assisted dying is Esther Ranson's daughter. I'm sure it's published that Esther only had 6 months to live 2 years ago. You're right, we checked that. 2023 it was said that Esther Ranson had 6 months to live, so these things can be wrong. These doctors, of course, it's only an estimate of what they do, but so much of the assisted dying case, the case of people like Jackie, is that it's about people who have 6 months to live. Betty says these laws will be abused just like most of the laws at some stage. The UK government and NHS has not proven itself competent in the last 40 years to have such power, says Betty. Andy says, both my grandfather and my dad had a horrendous last few months on this planet. I'm 70 and in good health, but I'm dreading getting old in case I get the same way. All the best, from Andy. Paul says, people are talking about the assisted dying rule as if it's a law that you have to die, but it's a choice, and a choice people should have. I would pick it if I got dementia rather than pay £1,000 a week to sit watching television in a care home till I run out of money or die. My choice, not the government. Paul, you're right, it's your choice, but if you get dementia, would it be your choice? And would people say, well, actually, he doesn't quite know what he's saying because he has dementia? He's been diagnosed with dementia. Is he compos mentis in order to make a decision about whether he dies or not? So there are lots of different complications in all of this. Graham in Birmingham says, I'm positive this present government is totally incompetent and incapable of such important decisions as these bills being passed at the moment. All the best. Fern in Glasgow, this country gets crazier by the day. We are fighting a battle trying to end the suicide numbers in the youth of our country. Now we allow it in our elderly, and it's okay because our government has given you permission and will even assist you. Regarding the assisted dying bill, another person says, could people lodge a letter with their solicitor pre any illness regarding their dying wishes when there would be no coercion from unscrupulous people? I've seen my mother, brother-in-law and various friends die in absolute agony. I would not wish that on anyone. Well, Mark is in Staffordshire and has given me a ring about this on 0344 499 1000. Mark, thank you for your call. What would you like to say on this issue?
Peter, my wife died about 12 weeks ago. She was given 6 months to live completely out of the blue on January the 30th.
Mark, I'm so sorry to hear that happened.
Yeah, she died on the 22nd of March, which was her birthday. What I'd say to the people who are arguing over this, it's the most distressing, horrible thing you can ever go to. My wife was begging to die at one point. There has to be some kind of law that allows it. I don't know whether I could have allowed it or gone ahead with letting my wife go through this. But I wish people on both sides would take a little care. And I know it's a passionate thing. And if you went through this, what you suffered and what my wife suffered, perhaps you'd understand why the assisting dying bill might be a good thing. It's pure coincidence that before she was diagnosed in December, we discussed this. I don't know what it came up with. And both of us decided that's what we wanted if it happens. And then pure bloody chance, on the 30th of December, she was diagnosed completely out of the blue. So all I'm asking is people, please show a little care and compassion to each other on both sides of the argument, because it's horrible. I mean, it's horrible.
I'm so sorry to hear you went through that, Mark. And clearly it's going to have an effect for a long time, and I can hear it in your voice.
Yeah.
With the debate that's been going on at the moment, has it been a sensible debate? Has there been anything in it that you think has resonated with you, that has given you any form of comfort that maybe what happened to your wife won't happen again?
There are some. I really can understand both sides of the argument. But I just wish people would calm down. It's a horrendous thing to go through. She had palliative care, which I'm going to say St Giles in Staffordshire. And I can't say how phenomenal they were. But the agony she still went through, even though they said she wouldn't, she was on 2 sets of injections to keep her out of pain. And if you watched somebody go through it that you've loved for 40 years, perhaps people would understand. They really need to take people to understand from both sides of this argument. It was horrendous. I mean, I sit in the garden now and I'm looking at where she died. I mean, Her bed's there, and I can still see it now. Just please have some compassion for both sides of the arguments. That's what I'm asking people to do. I'm begging people to do.
Mark, have you got support and family around you, people you can talk to today about this, who can help you?
I've got my son staying with me now and his partner, and my daughter will be here later. And my brother's been fantastic. He's probably listening to the show. But it's hell. It's the worst thing you can ever go through. Please have a little compassion for both sides of the argument. I said
Mark,
before this, we agreed. That's what we'd want.
Okay.
But to see us suffer.
Mark, I want to let you go just in a second, because I don't want to continue your distress. You've been very, very honest. You've been really straightforward. You've spoken so bravely to pick up that phone and give me a ring about the hardest thing you've ever gone through. I want to just end this on a positive note, Mark, and I want you to tell me not about your wife's death, but about her life. Tell me her name. Tell me her personality. What was she like?
Sue was the most wonderful, loving, beautiful wife that had ever been. She loved her grandchildren, her children. She was just happy all the time. I mean, she just loved everybody. We were lucky. We travelled the world, and even to the point where we got the diagnosis, which was completely out of the blue. Completely. We just thought we were going that she got some stomach problems, and then they told us she got 6 months. Even at that point, she said, oh, well, I've had a fantastic life. I mean, she was 61. She died on her 61st birthday. And she said, we've been everywhere. We got beautiful kids. We got everything we wanted. We'd had our health. And I'm sat in the garden now looking at all her creations.
Mark, what was her name, Mark?
Sue.
Sue. Mark, thank you for the call. We're going to remember Sue today. We're going to hopefully remember the good times with Sue as well, and I hope you remember them today as well. And thank you so much for your call. I wish you and I wish your family all the very, very best.
Peter, thank you also for being the best presenter of all the talks. You really are. You've given me so much hope. I listen to every discussion. I'm having to change on the subject. You really are the most...
That's very kind, Mark. Thank you.
Presenter. Thank you.
Well, thank you for ringing, and thanks for that incredible compliment, especially as you're having such a tough day. That means an awful lot coming from you, Mark, and I wish you and your family well. And listen, there's so many people who have we talk about this. Yes, it's a political argument. Yeah, it's about Parliament and how it votes and what the MPs think and all the rest of it. But it's about so much more than that, because it affects people's lives. And anybody who says, oh, politics is not for me, it doesn't affect me, it does affect you. It affects everybody. All the Parliament debates, all these decisions, all these laws, it affects people, and it could affect people like Mark and his family in this particular instance. Listen, that was a very, very difficult call for Mark to make. I really appreciate him making it. If you've gone through the same thing, or you're distressed by it, or that you have gone through similar issues, remember, there's a load of information on our website, talk.tv/helplines, talk.tv/helplines, of lots of organisations that you can contact, that can help you, someone you can talk to as well. And I really want to thank Mark for getting in touch with me. We'll take a break now, because I think we perhaps need to just take a little breather after that really brave call from Mark. Stay with us here on Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Richie says, "Oh my God, I'm a 54-year-old burly bloke and Mark has me in tears. R.I.P. Sue," says Richie. Penny in Essex says, "I know just what Mark went through. I cried with him," says Penny. I'm sure there are lots of other people who did as well. I was really, really moved by what Mark said. This is a very, very important debate. We've got to have it correctly. I want to hear all sides of the argument. I want to hear what everybody has to say. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Mary in County Down has been in touch again and says the 6 months to live measure is really disturbing. Doctors make a best guess on this when people have a terminal diagnosis. They're often wrong. A close family friend had prostate cancer and on at least 3 occasions when he had a sudden complication or appeared to be going rapidly downhill. Doctors advised him to put his affairs in order as they believed the end was near. He defied them, lived for more than 12 years from diagnosis, often feeling very well and without pain. He had a deep religious faith which helped sustain his optimism and desire to live. Also, on our guests earlier on, quite a lot of reaction to that, and June says, "I find it quite disturbing there's a group consisting of and called healthcare professionals who campaign to end their patients' lives." Andrew says, "A panel of social workers and psychiatrists for assisted dying." Well, that's 2 groups that never got anything wrong in the last 40 years. Would trust a panel like that less than MPs. Joanna, I'll read that out a little bit later. Michelle says, "All the elderly people with no family and dementia who are cared for by the state and are a cost to councils will be killed under this bill. It will end up being used completely differently to what they're selling it to us from MPs and the public." Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really interesting aspect of all of this that Kim raises when she says, apparently Parliament has absolutely no problem at all in legislating and surmounting the legalised deaths of the unborn and the old and ill in record time with all the legal and human rights issues, but cannot legislate against the invasion of up to 1,000 people a day illegally entering the country. Well, Kim, that brings us nicely on to our next topic, which is in regard to immigration. This is the mastermind of Australia's successful small boats crackdown, urging Sir Keir Starmer to resurrect the Rwanda plan. He's also been urged to consider a one-in, one-out migrant exchange scheme. Let's talk to Robert Bates, who is the Research Director of the Centre for Migration Studies. Robert, good morning.
Morning, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Just take us through what this Australian has said in all of this, because Australia's plan was very different, but there are some similarities, aren't there?
Yeah, so Australia is, of course, very geographically remote, so the situation they had with the small boats crisis required slightly different measures to us with our very small English Channel problem, which is, individuals coming across a few miles rather than the tens of miles, the hundreds of miles that they were coming in Australia. But Keir Starmer talks a lot about international cooperation and wanting to learn best practice, but he only seems to be focusing on talking to those Europeans who are making just as much of a mess of their situation as we are here. Alexander Downer, the foreign minister who effectively put in place the measures that really got to the bottom of Australia's problem, is trying to give him advice here effectively. He understands really the pull factors, the motivations of the individuals that are making the crossings. And he said, look, you won't actually bring crisis to an end until you put in place a very strong deterrent and reinstate something similar to that Rwanda plan.
There just isn't a deterrent, is there? I tried to get into this with Keir Starmer on Thursday. I'm not sure I really got anywhere on the deterrent point, because the policy just isn't working at the moment. He keeps talking about smashing the gangs, and when it comes to a deterrent, there just isn't one.
Exactly, and smashing the gangs is such a nebulous concept. How do we actually know when it's been successful? And you deal with one gang, you pop one boat, another one comes up in its place.
It's classic Starmer, though. It's let's have a sort of a legalistic solution, then it'll all magically work itself out. And that's not the case. If there's an incentive to come to this country, people are going to come.
Well, exactly. And this whole approach is sort of couched in that humanistic language that probably makes them feel a bit better about actually having to take measures to try and stop illegal migrants coming into Britain. But to go to Downer's point here, he has entrenched himself so wholly behind this strategy of smash gangs that for him to actually do an about turn now would be, as a man that's made already a lot of U-turns in his first year of government, it's an incredibly humiliating thing for him to do. And I think that's the worry here, that this situation is only going to get worse and worse. We'll probably see 50,000 people come across the English Channel this year. But does Starmer actually have the preparedness to get his fork out and start eating that humble pie. I would argue that this is probably something that's a bit too far for him to countenance, and thus Britain will continue to see this crisis escalate up until the next general election.
Presumably you have some sort of football match, or I don't know, some sort of arm wrestle with your rival think tank, the Migration Policy Institute in Washington DC. Robert, I'm sure you're all friendly rivals, but they are saying Britain should predict admissions numbers and act as a safe alternative to smuggler facilitated crossings. He has been urged, Keir Starmer, to use next month's UK-France summit to strike a one-in, one-out migration returns deal. What do you make of this particular proposal?
I'm terrified of anything that brings us closer into cooperating with Europe on the asylum crisis. If you look at when we were members of the European Union and the Dublin regulations, you saw that by the end, just before we left the European Union, we were actually having to take far more migrants from the continent than we were actually able to return. And what Europe is currently doing is currently overhauling its whole asylum scheme. And my concern is if we start having these conversations with France about how we deal with the cross-channel migration crisis, that we'll eventually find ourselves having to deal with other countries in the continent as well. I also think in terms of the one in, one out, it does very little to actually reduce the pressures on the asylum system, and we know for a fact that those that are actually given asylum are more likely to require public funds to support them and are less likely to actually go in and work and end up taking a lot of benefits and social housing and so forth. So this actually does very little, and it would do nothing, frankly, to actually reduce the numbers, nor to reduce the pressures that are being put on the British taxpayer. One final point on this as well is I think what we would be effectively doing in a way is outsourcing our asylum policy, or a component part of our asylum policy, to the French and allowing them to make some decisions on our behalf, and we'd be having to trust that they'd be operating in best faith there. And I think the last few years have shown that we can't really trust the French to do anything.
Well, exactly. We've given them £500 million a year, and what do we actually get for it? The square root of not very much. Thank you very much indeed, Robert Bates, there, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. We've had a voice note from Becky in Worcestershire on Starmer.
Morning, Peter. Becky from Worcestershire here. Regarding your interview with Keir Starmer, I understand that you had a very limited time and lots of questions to ask. But don't you think these politicians know that and are ready with their stock of batting away answers so they don't ever have to answer anything? Would it not perhaps take them by surprise and be a good idea to stick with one question and keep hammering at that for the full time you have, just to try and get a proper answer? Just an idea.
Becky, I can totally see where you're coming from. I agree with you. They do have stock answers to a lot of these things. You'll never please everybody with these interviews. You know, I wish I had longer. I wish I had an hour. I was told you've 6 minutes. Go in, do it. It took me 2 months to secure that interview. In fact, longer. And finally, we got it done. And Becky, I know what you mean. I'd love to go in and just say, right, let's just talk about rape gangs. But if I talk about rape gangs for 7 minutes, someone would say, well, what about my immigration? Didn't ask him a single question about immigration. Other people might say, look, we're on the verge of World War III. You didn't ask him about that. So there's no exact science to these things. But Becky, I know exactly what you mean. I'm as frustrated as you that often we don't get to the bottom of all these things. But I think better to have a Prime Minister interview than not. Another thing that would be nice would be Oasis, because the reunion of the century is just around the corner, and we're giving you a chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets in Manchester on the 19th of July. Oasis Live 25 is sold out, but we can get you in. That's not all though. Alongside the tickets, we'll put you up for the night in a hotel and put £5,000 in your back pocket, completely tax-free. Everything you need to know on how to enter, the details are coming up right now.
Alright, kid, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland. But a chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and £5,000 spending money. All you gotta do is text the word Oasis to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Sorted. Right, here's all the legal stuff. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You've got to have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com.
For me, it's quite straightforward. I would simply deport him. I don't think.
I just put him on a dinghy and send him out into the channel.
I'd send him straight back to wherever he's from.
But we can't. Legally we can't. We can't fly him back to Afghanistan. They won't have him back.
Well, if those people won't accept them, then we cut off all foreign aid until they start to behave sensibly, because we can't have people here who don't respect our culture, don't respect our laws, and actually damage our own way of life. I think the British people have had enough of it now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, of course, we're monitoring very closely what's going on in the Middle East, and you may know by now that each day for the last week or so I've been checking in with my friend Lee Scott. He is a former MP, and we work together, and he's been in Israel with his grandchildren. He's been there a number of days longer now than he wanted to be. I just wonder if there's any light at the end of the tunnel. He and his wife Estelle want to get back to the UK, of course. Lee, it's good to talk to you again. How have things been since we last spoke yesterday?
Well, since we last spoke yesterday, there was another missile attack at 3 o'clock this morning. So I think the Iranians really set their minds that we're not going to sleep. That's the sort of seventh night. A couple of points from last night that obviously you had the interview to do with David Lammy. The gentleman who you had on before me, I'm afraid I didn't catch the name last night, was saying about the taxpayer shouldn't have to pay for repatriation.
Yes.
They don't. Everyone here who wants to go back to Britain expects to pay for their flight. No one expecting a freebie. We just need the flights put on. And out of interest, Peter, Germany got its nationals out from Ben Gurion today, I'm told. So I don't understand all this business that we can't do it. I don't know why we can't get planes in here. But I would ask David Lammy that, having sat here for a week, having missiles thrown at us, we all want to get home. We just want to get back to our home and our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Have you had any further communication from the Foreign Office or anything?
Not since yesterday. I had an email yesterday telling me there would be repatriation flights. I haven't heard a word further since. No.
Okay.
Nothing.
Well, and how's your mood? I mean, you weren't in shelters last night, or maybe you were?
Yeah, we were in shelters.
You were in shelters.
Night.
Okay.
We were in the shelters last night with missiles landing. They're basically all over Israel now, but the Tel Aviv area particularly has taken a pounding.
You must feel so strung out by all of this, Lee. You wanted to visit your grandson for his bar mitzvah. You want to get home. You want to get back to your life. You've been in limbo for quite a while. You just want to get out and go home and get away from this very, very difficult situation that, of course, the Israelis are experiencing.
Peter, you're perfectly right. Again, I'm just going back to last night where it was said that people are advised not to go to Israel. We weren't. On the flight when we got here, there'd been no advice. I would never have got on a plane and come into a war zone. I wouldn't have done it. I'm not an idiot. We've known each other long enough. I wouldn't put myself or Estelle in this danger. And we're sitting here. I'm not ashamed to tell you, I am bloody scared. It's as simple as that. I'm not used to being in a war zone. I have found myself in a situation that I don't want to be in through no fault of my own. I expect to pay. I expect my government to be here for me when we need it. And I just feel, I'm not sure Mr. Lammy actually gets it. I really am not.
Yeah. Well, Lee, I wish you well. Let's maybe check in tomorrow and see how you're getting on and whether there's any progress and all of that. That's Lee Scott there, a friend of mine, former Conservative MP, who's stranded in Israel. We're going to continue talking about this story because these people cannot be forgotten. There are thousands of people, British nationals, who are in Israel. As Lee correctly says, they're the Germans, the Bulgarians, many other nations have got their people out. Why haven't we? What's the problem? We're asking the Foreign Office about this. They say they're trying, they're going to get commercial flights that's when the airspace is open. We'll stay on this story. We're going to cover it tomorrow and talk to Lee tomorrow as well and see what's happening with him. Quite a few people getting in touch. Jerry says your programme is one-sided. Your guests are against assisted dying. The people you show in your newsreel were the MPs here for just waiting for the public. Well, we've played Kim Leadbeater clip, I think, 3 times. She's for it. We've played it 3 times during the show. We've spoken to someone earlier on who's medical professionals for Care Not Killing. So, Jerry, I'm afraid that's just not accurate. We've had all sides of the debate, and in fact, we're going to hear more in just a second from someone who has some views on it. On the interview with the Prime Minister, Nina in Rains Park says, thank you so much for clarifying that, Peter. Rains Park, I think, is near Tolworth. I used to live in Tolworth, and I think I went through that area on the train. I think that's in southwest London, if I'm correct. Jane says, how long did it take for someone who agreed to talk to the Prime Minister? She's probably the only person left, says Jane. Dan from Kent says, I criticised Talk on Thursday night, and since then my messages are obviously going straight in the bin. I thought Talk was the channel where it was okay to be disagreeable. Obviously not. Dan, tell you what, you've sent me a text there. Send me another text, if you can, before 1 o'clock, and if what you say is legal for me to read out, which I'm sure it will be, Dan, because I've read out many of your messages before, I will read it out. Cal is the producer. Cal, if Dan texts again, whatever he says, as long as it's legal for me to read it out, you put it through on here and I will read out what Dan says. You can say I'm an idiot, you can say I'm dreadful, terrible person, whatever you want to say, Dan, as long as it's legal for me to read it out, I will read it out. So send another message through to 87222. That is a guarantee from me. Joanna in Salisbury says, regarding the Keir Starmer interview, great interview with the woke robot, says Joanna. I would love to see Alex Phillips interview him, the Rottweiler. Another person says, Jackie is lying, says Jen in Colchester earlier. I guess, I'm sure she would deny that. Our Supreme Court has been telling Parliament what to do since its inception, says Glenn. Nicola in Norfolk says, I've never agreed with Diane Abbott on anything, but she was 100% spot on in the assisted dying debate. I do not trust the state on this one. I do not trust them one iota. Rather than looking to rush this legislation, far more effort and state funding needs to be put into palliative and end-of-life care. It's a disgrace that the sector is so reliant on charity. Well, let's speak to Vivian in Devon. Vivian has some thoughts on this and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Vivian, what do you think? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hello. I support the bill, but I know what it's like to live with excruciating pain week after week after week.
Why is that, Vivian? What have you gone through?
I've got secondary progressive MS. It started to get worse 10 years ago, and I could have another 10 years of this because it won't kill me. It'll just make my suffering get worse and worse and worse.
Vivian, I'm so sorry to hear that. I've seen this up close. My aunt had secondary progressive MS. I know quite a few people who have MS, but secondary progressive is, as you know, far more than I do, the worst type. And I want to say, whatever you want to say on this issue, you can say it in the next few minutes before the news, but I just want to wish you really, really well, both now and the future, and please know that I'm thinking about you.
Thank you. And my heart goes out to Mark, who spoke earlier.
He was great, wasn't he? So brave, so brave. Tell me your thoughts on this then, Vivian. What would you like to happen?
I think neurodegenerative illnesses should be included because they're incurable. They get worse and worse. I could end my life the way I started it, in bed with people washing me, feeding me and changing my nappies. The only way I will be able to end it is to starve and dehydrate myself to death.
This legislation, though, Vivian, only covers people who have terminal illnesses.
I know.
You could have my understanding, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but what I think I remember about secondary progressive MS is you could basically have a normal life expectancy.
Yeah, I could live for another 10, 15 years in agony.
So
I've just taken yet another dose of morphine. I'm still in pain. These people who are against it have got no idea. They've not lived with pain that can still shock them.
Would you therefore want this legislation to actually go further?
Yes, I would.
So what option would you like to have? What would you like to do? Would it be now? Would it be in the future?
In the future.
Okay. Okay.
Like I say, I don't want to live in that way I've just described.
Yes, yes, yes.
The pain and the indignity of it, I couldn't cope with that. And these people who are so against it, would they want to live like that or exist like that?
There are people who have real worries about this legislation, who think that people like you or people who have terminal illnesses could be coerced, could be tried to force into this in some way. It could even just be suggested that they would think that way when they wouldn't have to, when they wouldn't necessarily have to go down that route. What would you say to that, Vivian?
I don't know. I suppose just because I'm the sort no one would talk me into doing something I don't want to do.
Yeah, yeah. What do your family think of your own thoughts on this? What do they say?
My husband's surprised I'm still here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He says it breaks his heart seeing me suffer so much. And there's nothing he can do.
Do you have support around you? Your husband's clearly a great guy. Do you have family, friends, carers who can help you?
I don't have carers, no.
Okay.
That's my husband, and he's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
But, I just think some of these people are so against it, they've got no idea. I heard some healthy lad yesterday saying suffering is a part of life. And I thought, you just want to try this.
Vivian, I'm so sorry to hear what you're going through, and you have a perspective that we needed to hear today, and I want to thank you for making the call today. I really appreciate it, Vivian.
Well, thanks for talking to me.
I wish you well, I really do.
Thank you.
This is just such a tough debate. It's a very difficult one. talk.tv/helpline. If you go to that website, there are loads of different suggestions on things and places you can go and organisations you can contact if you're distressed, if you're having issues. Vivian spoke so bravely there, as did Mark earlier. We'll talk to more people about this in the next hour between now and 1 o'clock. We're also going to talk about Iran as well, and Israel, huge issue, and could we be on the brink of World War III? Lots to discuss. Want to get your views too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sent his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Good afternoon, this is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. We're having a very spirited debate about assisted dying. A lot of people getting in touch from all sides of the argument. Maybe you're one of them. Whatever is on the tip of your tongue, let me know what you think about assisted dying, because it's gone through the House of Commons. 0344 499 1000. We're going to speak to a former Iranian diplomat in a second, pre-revolution of course. He is from the Iranian Centre for Policy Studies, and we'll find out what he thinks about what is going on there. We'll get your views as well on a really, really interesting one as well. A rape charge against an asylum seeker kept quiet to avoid inflaming tensions. Councillors were told to not mention it and not go public with it in case it would inflame tensions. Why weren't we told? Why weren't we given the full information? We'll talk to one of the councillors at the heart of that story. Loads to discuss on Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. We'll talk about Iran in just a second, but there's so many people getting in touch about assisted dying that I just want to read out a few more messages before we do that, and I'm sure Dr. Konsari won't mind just waiting just a second, because there are so many people getting in touch. If this bill goes through, says Benny in Belfast, the government must back it up with huge investment in world-class palliative care, but they won't. For most of us, the health professionals who look after us at birth and death are the most important, but at the end of life, the resources are surely lacking. Thank you to this person who says one thing that has not been talked about is those who are dependent on the state and have no family to look after their interests. There are many elderly, vulnerable, disabled, living in council accommodation who only have the state looking after their interests. When they become economically unviable, who protects them from a panel's decision? Who will not even see the person they're sending to death? A social worker, a local councillor? I think for many this is a hidden death sentence with no one to protect them. Barry in Morecambe says, will insurance policies paid on death still be valid if someone chose to end their life? Sue in Nottinghamshire said, I was in tears listening to Mark earlier on. I'm also 61. I'm going through hopefully minor health issues, so this has really resonated with me. In terms of assisted dying in principle, I'm in favour, but I'm concerned about the potential abuse of the law, particularly for vulnerable people like the elderly and those mentally impaired. We need to find a way of protecting them first and foremost, says Sue in Nottinghamshire. Nadine says some nice things about the calls with Mark and Sue, and I just want to thank everybody who's been in touch with that. Nadine says she was in tears. This is not about how I handle them, Nadine, but it's very, very kind of you to say so. It's about Mark's story, and it's about Sue's story as well, about Sue's death as well. We also heard just before the break there another heartbreaking story from Vivian as well. Nadine, I really appreciate your thoughts on that. And Kelvin says, my heart goes out to Mark. I'm glad this bill has gone through. 3 members of my family had Huntington's chorea. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, C-H-O-R-E-A. You hear all the time about dementia and cancer, Parkinson's. I watched my aunt, my dad and my elder brother suffering. They tried to take their own life, and I can tell you from experience of 35 years of coping, looking after them, it's not good. They can't eat food like us, they can't keep still, they watch TV and drink, clean themselves, they can't speak. It's 4 of the worst diseases in one. People like this should be able to choose to die. It's people like this who should be assisted and to let them go, says Kelvin in Macclesfield. Lots of really strong views on all of this. We will return to this. We've got plenty of time. We've got nearly an hour. If you want to get your views on the air, give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now about what's going on in the Middle East, and specifically with Iran, because it's a big, big issue. President Trump has said he wants 2 weeks to make up his mind. We have the UK leader, Sir Keir Starmer, saying de-escalation is the way forward. We've got Iranian innocent civilians caught up in all of this. They're living under the jackboot of their regime. Some of them are rising up and want the regime to fall. how do we support them from this dreadful, dreadful regime in Iran? Well, Dr. Mehrdad Konsari is with us. He's a former Iranian diplomat. He's now a senior consultant of the Iranian Centre for Policy Studies and is, of course, in opposition to the regime. Mehrdad, thank you so much for joining me today. Apologies for keeping you waiting there, but I'm sure you agree with me. It's a very, very spirited debate. I just wonder, from your perspective, where are things at the moment? Because that we hear so much information. People talking about regime change in Iran. People are talking about, will this de-escalation happen? What do you think is happening, and what do you think should happen?
Well, I think that to begin with, we are at a stage right now that combat operations are going on both ways. There's no question that the Israeli side of things is far more robust and more, you might say, effective in damaging Iranian assets than Iranian reactions to Israel and the damage that they are able to cause. But nonetheless, it is a worrying situation for all parties, and damage is being inflicted on both sides. Now, today, for example, the matters escalated with Israel announcing that they had killed 3 more senior Revolutionary Guard officers, who have been in charge of various programs that have dealt blows to Israel in the past. One of them particularly having been associated with the October 7th Hamas attack on an Israeli kibbutz. But so as we speak right now, it's very difficult to know exactly when these hostilities are going to subside, especially since the Iranian nuclear plants, which had been the main targets of Israeli attacks, have not all been, from an Israeli standpoint, neutralized. They have inflicted serious damage on a number of key nuclear installations and Revolutionary Guard barracks and depots and things like that. But major nuclear enrichment facility at Fordo, which is at a mountainside located some 800 meters, underground, is still intact. And that is, the questions are evolving around how to deal with that. Israel is incapable of doing that from the air by itself. That is where the talk of American involvement come in, and that is why President Trump has said that let's see if would you urge the Americans to help? Do you think they should get involved? What about the UK? Well, I think that one of the reasons why the Americans or President Trump postponed his decision is to give diplomacy a chance to see if they can escalate. They can use the fact that Fordo has not been hit as an incentive to urge the Iranians to accede to the terms which they had rejected prior to the start of these hostilities. They need to stop enrichment, and the choice for the Iranians is to have capacity or to continue enriching uranium at home or surviving. This is the where the matters rest at this point. Trump is hoping that in the course of the next week or so, as a result of the discussions that began with the Europeans in Geneva yesterday, that some kind of a formula can be found. Regional Arab states are anxious that America does not get involved, and they are helping in trying to see if they can come up with a formula that might be acceptable to the Iranian regime in a face-saving way to back out. But Speaking of the Iranian regime, I wonder what you make of the comments of Iran's foreign minister warning it would be very, very dangerous for everybody. He says if the US were to join Israel's strikes on the country. He was speaking on the sidelines of a meeting of the Council of Foreign Ministers of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. He said, unfortunately, we have heard that the US may join this aggression. That would be very unfortunate and very, very dangerous for everybody. I mean, is that just, he would say that, wouldn't he? Or I think he's talking through his hat. This is just rhetoric and propaganda. Iran is not in a position to inflict serious damage on anybody. Iran a year ago was in a completely different position to what it is now. It has lost all its proxy powers. its weapons, its ballistic missiles are becoming increasingly depleted. They are able to attack certain soft targets belonging to regional states in the Persian Gulf or American installations, but that would invite a tremendous American reprisal or even regional reprisals. They know that they cannot match those things. And as suicidal as they may seem, I don't believe they are.
And what do you make of Netanyahu's strategy here? Because of course he has weakened Hamas, he's weakened Hezbollah, Houthis are weakened to some degree. Was it just perfectly reasonable that Iran was next?
From his point of view, Iran, I mean, you have to bear in mind that Netanyahu's position on Iran is not something that is a result of what has transpired in the past year.
Well, he's been saying it for 20 years. He's been saying it for 20 years, yeah.
That's right. So this has been, this attack on Iran, I think, will essentially mark his legacy with his own people and his own, within the Israeli state. But the fact is that the provocations by Iran, the continuous negative reporting about the state of Iran's nuclear situation, as demonstrated by the IAEA Board of Governors report recently, all of these things gave him the impetus to go for it while the opportunity existed. And it's a very sad thing for me as an Iranian, as opposed as I am to the Islamic regime, to see these tragedies fall upon my people and our country and our assets, and the humiliation that this has caused. But this is where the Islamic regime is to blame. They have been provoking this situation for 44 years. And, at one point, these things get out of hand, and they are not in a position that now to defend our people or to defend our territorial integrity and things like that, which is a terrible shame, but that is where we are. But right now, as we speak, it's very difficult also to think of change that might come about.
Well, that's a question I'd love to ask you, actually, because I presume that you haven't been to your home country since the revolution. And
no, I haven't. No.
And I wonder if you ever think you'll get back there.
I live to go back to my country, and I certainly want to die in my own country, and this has been my lifelong ambition. I think that possibilities and potential for that have now become far greater, especially since, I think that we are not seeing any signs of major unrest against the regime as we speak now, because of the fact that everybody is so preoccupied with having to deal with the crisis that is facing them in every way.
Of course, yeah.
From, basic foodstuffs, fuel, electricity, things like that. But the minute that these hostilities subside, I think that the Islamic regime is going to be in a very difficult position. I think Ayatollah Khamenei, whom the Israelis had mentioned about possibly taking out, there are talk now within Israeli think tanks that it's better to leave him there, because if he's there, he has to be responsive, and his position becomes totally precarious and won't be able to hold out. And there is expected, some kind of a revolt from within his own constituency against him, which would then possibly could lead to some kind of a peaceful resolution for change in Iran. These are the things that we are waiting to happen, but things that will not remain the same. Ayatollah Khomeini will not continue doing what he did before, and the Iranian regime will not act in the same manner as it had before once hostilities have subsided.
Thank you. It's fascinating to talk to you. Thank you, Dr. Mehrdad Konsari, who is a former Iranian diplomat, obviously, from before the revolution. He is also senior consultant of the Iranian Center for Policy Studies and is an opposition figure to the regime. What do you think of what he's saying there? 0344 499 1000. We'll take more of your calls, more of your voice notes, and indeed your messages, loads of them, on assisted dying. I'll read out as many as I can. Have you heard from Dan in Kent? Has Dan sent us another text yet? Not yet. We haven't had a text message from Dan in Kent. Dan, you've got 44 minutes. If you send something out, leave illegal for me to read, I will read it, I promise you. I don't want to censor anybody. We're the home of free speech, we're the home of common sense. Dan and Kent, you got your message, you send it through. We'll read out plenty of others and take some calls in just a second. Stay with us.
For me, it's quite straightforward. I would simply deport him. I don't think.
I'd just put him on a dinghy and send him out into the channel.
I'd send him straight back to wherever he's from.
But we can't. Legally we can't. We can't fly him back to Afghanistan. They won't have him back.
Well, if those people won't accept him, then we cut off all foreign aid until they start to behave sensibly, because we can't have people here who don't respect our culture, don't respect our laws, and actually damage our own way of life. I think the British people have had enough of it now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side.
Thank you so much to everybody who's been in touch, including Alan in Norfolk, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Alan, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello there, Peter. Great show as usual.
Thank you.
I was just really wanting to comment on the feedback you've been getting following the interview with the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I'm no fan of this government, but I do think it's important that the government is strong and be seen to be competent. And I think one of the major issues for this administration is that they completely lack credibility. On a whole variety of issues, they seem to be wanting in terms of their evidence for doing things and their reasoning about how they're going to tackle it. And I think they've had, a number of U-turns on some quite major policies of theirs, and they're only a year into their government.
It's a really good point, and if you look at the polls, Alan, you can see that people just don't have confidence in this Labour government. I presume you're one of them.
Well, yeah, and I think I think more than anything, it's the kind of rhetoric that comes out. And look, I know all governments use rhetoric and will try and put a spin on anything, really, but it stretches the credibility, really, of the government, and I think it in a way, is slightly insulting of the population, really, when they start trying to say that they're putting more money back in people's pockets, that they're dealing with the illegal migrant issue, and all of these sorts of things, the winter fuel U-turn.
Can you think of anything positive in your mind that Keir Starmer has done in the last year?
The only thing that I think possibly is, this might be controversial. I'm not a fan of the European Union either, but I think it could benefit us having some closer ties with them, just because we're not part of the EU anymore. There might be, benefits to shared cooperation on certain things.
Okay.
And I think that, something like the Erasmus deal for young people was actually a very, very good thing. And if we can do those sorts of things, but we're not surrendering or in some way...
A lot of people worried about that, though, Alan, aren't they? They're worried that Keir Starmer, who campaigned for a second referendum, is someone who would sell us down the river and dilute Brexit in some way.
Sure, and I get that, and I think that's a very valid concern by people who voted Leave, and probably people who voted Remain are absolutely thrilled about it. But I think overall, the impression I have is that they're building their policy now and their agenda based on the recent local government elections, and I think it's no surprise that in some ways it's almost like the Reform Party is setting government policy, because what they're saying they would do if they were in power, the government seemed to be following suit. And I think it almost looks like a lack of integrity and a lack of principle, in that you're changing what you fundamentally believe just purely to get votes. And I know it's all about being in power. As Labour would know, there's no credibility in being in opposition. But, if you're going to stick with a set of principles and a political doctrine, but then you completely disregard it because you're worried about the vote share, then maybe that means that what you're offering people is not what people want anymore. So that was just really my point. It's more about, to me, it worries me that our government, the government of the United Kingdom, lacks credibility and lacks any really kind of sense of competence and leadership, and that I think is dangerous, really.
Alan, I think you speak for an awful lot of people. Is your indicator on? Are you pulled into the side of the road?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
No, don't apologise. Don't apologise. It's absolutely fine. You're very kind to stop your journey to have a chat with us. Alan, where are you off to today, anyway?
I'm just going home now and just going to enjoy the garden.
Good stuff. Well, I hope you have a lovely day. Is it nice weather in Norfolk?
It's beautiful. It's very nice.
Excellent. Well, thanks. Excellent. Well, thanks for the call, Alan. You speak a lot of sense. Thank you very much indeed. Safe journey home there. That's Alan in Norfolk there. Often people ring us and then we ring them back maybe 20 minutes later or something like that, when we can fit the calls in, and sometimes people are in the middle of things or whatever, or on their way home, as Alan is. Jason in Worthing says, if politicians don't answer questions directly as asked, then the presenter should say interview over. I cannot wait until the presenter does this. They would have my respect and it would make the politician look like a fool. Just don't give them the airtime that they crave. They answered us, not the other way around, says Jason in Worthing. Jason, I think it was Richard Madeley, he was a presenter in this station at one stage, and he interviewed, I think, Gavin Williamson, who bizarrely was at a zoo or something. There were certainly some elephants behind him. I don't know why, but there was a time when Richard Madeley just cut off the interview and said, you're not answering the questions. That's fine, I think, when it's down the line. I don't make a habit of it, because I do like politicians to have their say, and I think that actually sometimes when they say things that are waffle, it sort of reveals themselves. They reveal themselves, and you can challenge them. You can certainly robustly do that. We do that in this station. Different people have different styles, but Jason, it's one thought anyway. Lots on assisted dying as well. M in Wiltshire says, it's just had a note with me. I was told I was terminal before Christmas. I'm so sorry to hear that. I think I have turned it round with the treatment not underwritten by the NHS. I've looked down the barrel of this firsthand, and it is true I seem better, but it should be remembered that this should be a choice. I believe it should be. I really feel for the chap you spoke to earlier on. He's so right. Let's have some compassion. That's Mark, who we spoke to earlier on. Don in Chelmsford. Don, you always put Chelmsford. I've read out a number of messages from you in the past. You always put Chelmsford in those lovely little ellipsis brackets. It's very cute. Don says in his message on assisted dying, he says, my mother went into a nursing home. At the time she went in, we were told she was on palliative care and to be prepared for a phone call. 3.5 years later, she celebrated her 100th birthday in February. She recovered thanks to the care she gets. Well, a very happy 100th birthday to your mother, Dawn. Sounds as if she's doing well. Mark says, I was profoundly touched to hear your caller's courageous and articulate words concerning Sue, his wife. Candidness was exceptionally moving, says Mark. Talking about the other Mark, the Mark we spoke to a little bit earlier on. Karen says, your guest who was pro-assisted dying kept saying that there was no evidence in other countries about coercion. Surely that's ridiculous, as the people who are now dead can't tell us if they were coerced, says Karen. I think there is evidence of coercion in other states as well. We need to avoid that if it becomes legal here, certainly. Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's a very, very complicated and nuanced debate. Miranda's been in touch and says, initially, once abortion became legal, it was, I believe, required to be up to 24 weeks. I think you're right. That was the limit set, I think, in 1967. Now look where it has crept up to. How do they abort a baby that is ready to be born, remove it and kill it, try to kill it in the womb, then deliver a dead baby? It's utterly repugnant and will be misused 100%. I don't have the words to say what I and everyone I know feel about this. It's murder, not entirely surprising that it's come from the Labour Party. So if they can do this with abortion, then the assisted dying will become much more expanded, says Miranda. To be fair to those who put this through, like, I disagree with it, but to be fair to those who put this through on Tuesday, this abortion legislation, it's in regard to decriminalising people who abort after 24 weeks. That's not to say that any doctors will be doing it. It's that if people who are mentally unstable, people who are in great distress, people who are coerced, people who are in abusive relationships abort their baby, that they'll not be prosecuted for it. Now, should they be? That's a whole other debate. I'm very happy to have it between now and 1 o'clock. If you want to give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, you can send me a voice note on 0344 499 1000. You can use the same number to ring me and the same number to send me a WhatsApp text message, as Colin has. He says, I've been on this planet a very long time, 77 years. I know that from experience there is no easy answer. Nobody is right or wrong on this issue. That's why I think a referendum would be the way to go, as normally the great British voting public are seldom wrong, apart from the last general election, says Colin. Penny sent a lovely message saying, brilliant programme. People who say your show is one-sided aren't listening to it, says Penny. I agree with that. We have all perspectives here, and if you disagree with me, you let me know. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. And a final one for the moment from Andy in Alicante. Lucky you, Andy. He says, I don't understand how democracy works. A political party running for election publishes a manifesto saying what they'll do. Then when they get in, they do a load of other stuff they never mentioned. All the controversial things Labour have done were not in their manifesto, so surely their election to power is false. I believe that a manifesto should be legally binding. If they subsequently want to do something else, it goes to a referendum. And I think the Swiss are a bit like this. Makes sense to me when the current system doesn't. The Swiss are always having referendums, and the other people who are always having them are the Irish, because they have a very, very strict constitution, and a constitution that is really, really binding. They have referendums and all sorts of things. Let's hear on assisted dying a voice note from Matt in Hove.
Peter, Matt in Hove here. This might be controversial, but how bloody dare these MPs vote to decide when other people want to end their lives? It's got sod all to do with them. I don't want to get old and decrepit. And when I want to go, I'm going to go. And I won't be told by an MP when I can and can't do it. Stay out of people's lives.
Thanks, Matt. I totally get your point, and I do think that people should be able to, in some way, make their own decision. I suppose it's about the apparatus around that. I suppose it's about the fact that if, for example, at the moment anyway, if you have a relative who says to you, as we heard from Mark earlier, his wife saying, Sue, saying, that she wanted to die, if Mark had helped her die, he would be prosecuted. What do you think about that? Do you think people should be prosecuted for that? Or should his wife and people like her have the option to take their own life? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. And thank you very much. I try not to read out these messages too much, but it's not just about me. It's about Alex as well. Alex and Peter should be leading our country. How wonderful that would be. I think it would be a nightmare scenario for many people, given all of that. But listen, thank you to the person who said that. There are lots of lovely people today, lots of very honest people as well. Lots of people giving their opinions in a very straightforward, very honest way, and that is what we want on this station. And thank you to everybody who's rung in. We have another half an hour to get your views on the air. 0344 499 1000. I know you're going to have an opinion on this next story. This is an absolute scandal, and Councillor George Madgwick has been talking about it. He is a councillor in an independent councillor actually in Southsea, and a rape charge against a man staying in an asylum hotel was kept quiet. Why was it kept quiet? Because officials feared inflaming community tension. Maybe they should just tell us what's going on. Maybe they should just be honest with us about what is happening in the week that Baroness Casey, Louise Casey, directly linked illegal immigration to rape gangs. We're going to talk about this in a second with the councillor who has lifted the lid on this. George Madgwick is with us next. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So this is a pretty crazy story from Portsmouth, but it's happening in many places. A rape charge against a man staying in an asylum hotel was kept quiet because officials feared inflaming community tensions. There were also 2 other rape cases where it was not disclosed the suspects were at taxpayer-funded asylum hotels. We're being kept in the dark about this. This is absolutely shameful. It's happened at Home Office funded accommodation at Portsmouth, in London and in Manchester. I want to speak to Portsmouth City Councillor George Madgwick now, who's gone public on all of this. George, I wonder, can you just talk us through the events around this and specifically the briefing? I mean, tell us everything, but also specifically what you were told as a councillor, because you were given a private briefing, or what they thought was a private briefing, by Portsmouth City Council officials on all of this. Just talk us through this and what has happened in the last few days.
Good afternoon, Peter. Yeah, firstly, I think before I say anything, I think we really need to remember that at the heart of this story, there is a young woman who has had her life changed forever. And I think we need to remember that is the core factor in this story.
Of course.
And obviously sympathies to her and her family completely. So first of all, it started on social media a week or so ago with unconfirmed reports and people kind of making accusations. But you hear that on social media a lot, and it's unsubstantiated. And basically, then what happened is the council reached out to particular councillors, like group leaders, so the leader of each political party, and said that we have this information, and shared a set amount of information with us that was kind of privy at the time. And one of the officers, senior officers, called me up during the daytime and said, George, I must make it very clear to you, you're not to post this, tell anybody about this, talk about this in any capacity to anybody. You're under a council code of conduct, blah, 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 blah. And I thought that was a bit inappropriate anyway, just to randomly call me.
Totally inappropriate. You're a public representative and you can say whatever you like within the law. What was your response to that officer?
I told her I'm going to go away and seek legal advice, to be honest with you, because I thought that, it was ridiculous. And I was really frustrated at the time. And obviously it's difficult when you're told not to talk about something and you're kind of told there could be legal ramifications. It's a concern. So I was a little annoyed because I knew this information. And I then basically put on Facebook, on my social media, that I'm really annoyed that councillors get to find out certain information, but we're told to not talk about it and people should know. And then at midnight that same day, on my personal phone, it's not on my council phone, my personal phone, I got a message from a senior officer again saying, basically, George, may I remind you you're under a code, blah, blah. Basically, in a nutshell, ad lib and keep quiet, basically, is what the message said. And I spoke to a couple of people in senior positions. They gave me an opinion that it was unacceptable. So I decided to try and find a loop around it. And
the people in senior positions, were they legal people? Who were they?
It was the chief executive of Portsmouth City Council.
Okay. And had you taken legal advice in regard to this?
I don't know. First of all, it's a lady called Natalie Brown.
No, but had you taken legal advice in the days around this? Did you speak?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. So I got in legal advice, and they basically told me that go and find anything that's in the public records, because then you can't be told off for anything privy. So I went to the courts the next morning, gave them the name of the person, and they provided me with a document with the name of the person, the address, the charges that they were being charged for, what the outcome of the court decision was, which was to hold the gentleman in remand, and basically the future court date. So they released to me the information of the court, which is then obviously a public record.
So all of that is in the public domain then. So this was, just to be clear here, a load of information was in the public domain. Had a reporter, for example, from a local paper, not that many of them exist anymore, been in court when that happened, all of that information could have been put in the public domain very, very easily. And you were told not to put it in the public domain. You were told to shut up.
Yes.
I mean, that's outrageous.
Yeah, I mean,
and the reason, let me just be absolutely clear for anybody who's just maybe not heard all of what you've said there. People tune in and tune out at various points. So what you knew and what is in the public domain and what is factual is that there was someone staying in an asylum hotel, a would-be asylum seeker, who's been charged with rape, has been remanded in custody, and you were told not to put that information in the public domain because it would inflame community tension.
Correct.
I mean, what I would argue is that not being in the public domain, I mean, it's like every political scandal. It's less what happened, it's more the cover-up. The fact that that was actively covered up by senior people in the police and in the council, that is really worrying.
Well, this is the thing, and I went back to them and said to them, you wonder why people don't trust politicians and
Yes.
public bodies. It's of no surprise, and this kind of thing needs to be told openly to everybody, and then allow the public to take their own view and their own opinion. But don't kind of patronise the public into believing that they are irresponsible with the information that's needed. At the end of the day, I think we all know that if the situation around this was slightly different, it would have been broadcast on every media outlet locally of what the case was. But
well, you're absolutely right in that we're in a situation where even before charges are brought, Merseyside police are saying, because what happened in the incident that happened in Liverpool on the day of that huge parade, we're very, very familiar with what happened. Charges have been brought. There are active legal proceedings. I'm going to be careful what I say. But what we were told on that day, factually, was that a 53-year-old white British man was the suspect. This was before charges were brought. Was the suspect. Then charges were brought about that against that man. His name was put in the public domain. His picture is there and all the rest of it. But what happened here was that a charge had actually been brought against this man. He's been remanded in custody. This was in the courts. This was a matter of public record for anybody who was in the court, could have reported this, put it on Facebook, put it on Twitter or whatever, had they been in court. But you were actively told to suppress the information because it would risk inflaming community tensions. That is straightforwardly a cover-up.
Yeah, and I think just to point out as well, because you mentioned before, the police had no involvement in messaging me at all.
Okay.
So I've not,
okay.
I've not spoken to the police in any capacity. So Hampshire Police have not told me to be quiet in any capacity. This is purely council officials at Portsmouth City Council that have told me
so
this.
So that senior officer you spoke to earlier, that's an officer of the council?
Yes.
So
yes.
These are people, these are not councillors, these are people within the council. These are civil servants within the council. I mean, I am horrified by that, and a number of our viewers and listeners, I'm sure, will be absolutely horrified too, because here we have a would-be asylum seeker staying in an asylum hotel at taxpayers' expense. He commits an alleged rape. A charge has been brought against him, and you're told by officers at Portsmouth Council not to put that in the public domain. To give them their say on this, they have released a statement to The Sun. They say, we knew the Home Office accommodation link would become public knowledge through the court proceedings, and based on events elsewhere in our country, we're conscious there may be community tensions related to it. What do you make of their response?
It's poor, isn't it? It's a poor response. I'm sure officers at the council right now are running around like headless chickens trying to figure out what to say or what to do, because I've seen on social media they're being hounded. And I do feel sorry for the officers that have no involvement in this whatsoever. But the buck stops at the top at the end of the day. I've spoken to the chief executive in the last coming days. I told her what I was going to do. I've been open and transparent with her. She's been fully aware of it. But at the end of the day, messaging a counsellor on a private number at midnight to try and keep him to be quiet is unacceptable, completely overstepping the mark, completely overreaching. Her response to me was, when I told her that I felt she was overstepping, her response to me was that she's not overstepping, she's trying to keep me to the code. But with all due respect, it's not her job to keep me to the code. As you say, I'm an elected official, elected by residents. Officers are not. They're civil.
Your duty is to your constituents.
That's it. And when I stood for election, I stood on a manifesto of openness and transparency, and because that's what I believe in. I believe that the public should be given the facts, whatever they are, doesn't matter how good or how bad they are, and to allow the residents then to have their opinion on what those facts are. And my conscience would not allow me to be complicit in a potential corrupt. And it felt really horrible for those couple of days. It felt horrible. And although I'm getting a lot of attention now on social media, especially on Twitter, and although I'm getting a bit of hassle from a certain section, my conscience is clear. And I think that's the main point. And I think more people that are elected that hear about this stuff really need to speak up, because you can.
George, I wonder, I mean, you're a brave man. You've done this. You've gone public. You're talking on national TV about it. You've spoken to The Sun as well. I just wonder, I mean, there must be loads of councillors from lots of different political parties that this has happened to previously. We've heard about the specific things happening in London and Manchester as well. They're not saying anything. What's your message to them? They're people who know this sort of stuff has happened. They're elected officials who know this sort of stuff has happened. Surely that's what the grooming gangs, the rape gangs inquiry is meant to lift the lid on this week. And here we are, this week, in 2025, we have an alleged rape by someone who's gone through the courts, who is remanded in custody for that alleged rape, and you're being told to shut up.
Yeah, well, that's the point, though, is that people are worried about speaking out, Peter, because people don't know the law system. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I'm an independent. I've got nobody that I'm answerable to. So unlike when you have a national party like the Conservatives or Labour or Liberals, where you've got a whip, and if you say something out of line, you can be suspended. I don't have that. So that's first and foremost. I'm free to be able to speak openly, which is a really nice thing to do. But you've got to remember that when people are contacting you, especially people of seniority are contacting you saying, do not speak, you could be in breach of the code of conduct, you could be in breach of this, you could do that. It is daunting.
Of course, and you listen to them and you think, well, you know, maybe they know what they're talking about here. What about those people who have said this to you? What about those council officers? Should they resign? Should they be sacked?
Listen, that's a decision for the leader of the City Council to make. At the end of the day, he has the authority to hire and fire the chief executive.
Do you have confidence in them?
No, absolutely not. You know, this is a chief executive that that I personally haven't necessarily got on with all the time. She passed through a Council of Sanctuary agreement and signed us up to that when we were heavily against it. They have put a political stance as an authority on the Portsmouth City Council website, saying that the Council of Sanctuary agreements do not encourage.
What is a Council of Sanctuary? What is that?
So a Council of Sanctuary is an agreement that is signed by the council that basically agrees that the council will change its philosophy to welcome and support migrants when they come into the city. It doesn't necessarily cost much money, but it's a promise or a commitment to make.
Well, it's a clear direction of travel. Listen, George, will you keep us updated on this? Because what I think is going to happen is that some clown is going to ask for some sort of probe into you or censure because you've broken the code of conduct or whatever. What I want to say is well done for breaking the code of conduct. Well done for putting this in the public domain, because sunshine is the best disinfectant. And if I were in your community, and I'm going to ask you now about how people have reacted. Obviously, you've been under a lot of pressure. This has been a very busy few days. But presumably, a lot of your constituents are saying, well, we'd rather know that this has happened.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a certain reputation for my neck of the woods because I've done this a few times now. I released the Labour WhatsApp scandals in Portsmouth.
I remember. I talked to you about that. Yeah.
I've done a few things now, and I get respect from the residents. At the end of the day, you know, I'm not so popular in council. You know, opposition councillors are not very fond of me, but I don't care about that. At the end of the day, I'm elected and answerable to my local residents, and as long as they keep electing me, I'm happy. And last year I won by the largest majority our ward's ever had, so clearly I'm doing something right. But the majority of people have reached out to me, and I mean hundreds of people since last night, and it's all been supportive. And these are even people that don't necessarily usually support me or support independent politics. And it's been very positive. People have felt refreshed, and hopefully it encourages others to speak up. That's what I'm hoping. You know, someone's got to put their head above the parapet. I know I'm going to get stick from Monday. I know I'm going to get questioned, and I know what's coming.
And it shouldn't. I mean, it's absurd that it should. You're merely highlighting information that's in the public domain about an alleged rapist who was staying in an asylum hotel. If I were a resident in your area, if I was a member of the public who lived in your ward, I would be very grateful for you for bringing that to my attention. And these people saying, oh, it inflames community tensions, well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. They don't know that, and it's not their decision to make, is it? And they're not elected, and you are, George.
Correct. And, you know, at the end of the day, I care more about the safety of the women and girls in our city than I do about hurty feelings of some officer. And they don't have to like that. But at the end of the day, our core process should be to protect and promote the safety of Portsmouth residents, local people, and people need to know what's happening on their doorstep. So be it. If my head rolls, it rolls.
Okay, well, George, listen, thank you very much. Let's keep in touch on all of this and let me know how things go. Just to allow... to say that the Chief Executive of Portsmouth City Council is here, of course, to defend herself. I will read out again what they've told The Sun. in regard to this. Let me just find the statement. A spokesman for Portsmouth City Council effectively admitted to choosing not to go public, saying it was informed of the charge ahead of the court hearing but left public statements to police. A spokesman said, "We knew the Home Office accommodation link would become public knowledge through the court proceedings, and based on events elsewhere in the country, we're conscious there may be community tensions related to it." So Natalie Brahma Pearl isn't here to defend herself. We'll be asking further questions about this. We're going to continue covering this story, and no doubt we will talk to George about that. Again, that's George Madgwick there, Portsmouth City Councillor, lifting the lid on what we weren't told, and council civil servants apparently making a decision there about what we should or shouldn't be told. Well, actually, thank goodness for people like George who ignored them and said sunlight is the best disinfectant. This is just absolutely scandalous and shouldn't be allowed. Unbelievable. Brad in Cambridge says, so the council is ignoring its duty to prioritise the victim and their constituents in favour of protecting the perpetrator. Brilliant, says Brad. Thank you, Brad. I think you make complete sense there, and thank you to Paul, who says, hush order. When did we get to state where telling the truth is classified as brave? It should be the norm. Paul, you're right, but the problem is the exception rather than the rule. But a very good point that you made there. Lots more to come. We'll talk, if you want to react to that story, drop me a text, 87222, or better still, give me a ring or drop me a voice note, 0344 499 1000. Loads to talk about between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk.
You can't help it, right? Because I'm looking at that image, and through my mind, I'm playing the kind of Benny Hill theme.
But yeah, I know.
Because I know that the ridiculous cops are just out of the picture, and it's hilarious, you know.
Yeah, well, so what happened? This is the scene with our crutch guy that this is unfolded yesterday morning. He'd apparently previously tried to get on a boat the day before, but, you know, his disability got the best of him and he just couldn't quite make it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch in regard to George. One person, Arthur Braby, says, well done, George Madgwick, local hero. Linda says, well done for the transparency and putting our children and women before your livelihood. We need every single person to be honest so we can stop the rot and protect our girls, says Linda. Totally agree with you. If you want to respond to that story that we heard about, 0344 499 1000. Fee in Berkshire has been in touch, 0344 499 1000. As I say, that is the number to get in touch. She has done so. Fee, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi, Peter. First off, hats off to George. What a man. I wish we had local MPs in our constituency.
You know what? If more politicians were like George and they just told the truth and let people make up their own mind about stuff, then trust in politicians would be very high.
Yeah, exactly. And my call is relating to your fabulous interview with Keir Starmer. First thing I noticed was He just waffled on and on and on and was using up the valuable time that you had to press and ask further questions, which all politicians do, and it infuriates me. They just can't answer.
Try being the interviewer, Fee, but totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
But I just wanted to say I agree with, I think it was Tom who called earlier about the government having lost. We've lost all faith in the government. They have no confidence anymore. I was in Cyprus recently in April visiting friends, and we went out for a meal, and there were some expats there that had been there for 20 years, and I was speaking to the wife, and she was just constantly, she loved England. I put loved, because her view now is, what the hell is going on in a country that I once adored?
It's past tense, isn't it? It's past tense.
It is. And I found myself wanting to try and defend, becoming very patriotic and wanting to try and find something in my head that I could put a positive spin on and say, oh, it's going to be all right, we've got this going on, this is a good thing and that. And I couldn't find one thing to argue against what she was saying, and I felt a bit attacked in some way, because she was.
Do you know what I know,
negative.
Fee? I know. Sorry to interrupt you. I know exactly what you mean, because I'm very critical of this country. I'm very critical of the government. Not as critical as that dog is of me, though. And certainly, I mean, I was in Dublin over Christmas, and one of my friends was talking to me, and he said, "Look, Britain's finished. It's over."
Yeah.
And I really bristled, and I sort of, no, I have pride in my country. I think it's a great country. I think there are great people there, and there are some great people. But I know exactly what you mean. I've been in that situation where you think, actually, it's almost not okay for other people to criticise us, but still, they kind of have a point. And if you're a foreigner looking, or even an expat or whatever, looking back at Britain and seeing what is there now, well, what is there to recommend this country?
Nothing. And I felt dismayed, and I actually felt quite emotional about it when we got back from the dinner. I thought, you know what? What can I say that is absolutely a positive spin on this current government, on even the last government? Everything is just, we are hounded by everything.
I asked another caller about this a little bit earlier, Fee, and I mean, it's nearly been a year since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. It will be in a couple of weeks' time. Is there anything he's done that you agree with?
No.
Not
absolutely not. I mean, I think the thing is, I just think that all of them are in cahoots, and they're a bunch of liars. They were voted in on a manifesto that they have completely gone against. They have U-turned on some of those decisions now, but I think they're just brainless. You know, you have some business people come on your show and talk about a logical and approach and a business approach to how to help with the economy. Rachel Reeves has not got a business mind at all. She's the wrong person in the job, and we're just slaughtered. It doesn't matter. I mean, even simple things like having St George's Day as a bank holiday.
Yeah, so straightforward. I mean, that would be a really good thing. Really straightforward. Let's just do it.
Absolutely. I mean, Pride have a Pride month. They have a whole month to celebrate, which is absolutely fine. Don't have any issues with that at all. But where's our patriotic day to celebrate our nation?
Do you know what I would do? I know this would have an effect on the economy, and I don't want it to have an effect on the economy, although it might be good for the pubs.
One day.
Well, what I would have 4 days. I would have. I'm now going to not remember what the patron saints are. St Andrew's Day, I would make a bank holiday right throughout the UK. St George's Day, bank holiday right throughout the UK. St Patrick's Day, bank holiday right throughout the UK.
Exactly.
And the other one is the Welsh one, which is St David's Day. St David's Day. There we are. Yes. I'll have all four of them. Remind people of, why doesn't the Prime Minister say, you know, I'm really proud to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Those 4 days, they represent the 4 constituent nations, the awesome foursome of the UK. Let's make them all bank holidays. Let's raise a pint to our country.
Completely. I mean, Scotland and Ireland, obviously, they have theirs as a bank holiday.
They do there. They do there, but not. I would do it right throughout the UK. Yeah. Yeah.
But we can't. So why can't Wales and England be on an equal footing? And we actually have an opportunity to be allowed to be patriotic. I think so many of us feel like we can't even be allowed to be patriotic now. God forbid if I put a Union Jack and a short.
Oh well, there'll be tutting. There'll be people labelling you a racist. Fee. Yeah.
I'm infuriated. We are losing our identity as a nation, and it drives me nuts. That's all I wanted to say.
Great call. Go and give that dog some treats there as well. Faye, you're very welcome. And thank you so much for your lovely call. Really good call. Really good sentiments there. Thank you to Leslie, who says the Liverpool Care Pathway provided pain relief and sedation, but withdrew fluids and nutrition. So why do we need this new assisted dying bill? Thank you to Margaret, who says Starmer has to stop the boats. Another 450 yesterday. Someone in the Commons has to ask him that question. Why doesn't he get a grip? Think 1,505 days. What a shambles. Yvette Cooper needs to address this crisis. And Cliff in Berkshire says, regarding abortion, a 24-week survival rate of premature births is around 50% with each extra week, so the survival rate increases by 10%. We could now have the juxtaposition of two teams of doctors working with one to dismember and abort an unborn child and the other team in the next room fighting to save an unborn child, each with a similar period of gestation. Medical knowledge has increased substantially since 1967 when the last abortion laws came in, says Cliff. Cliff, that is a very good point, a very serious point, and thank you for it. Thank you also to the top team behind the glass who have made the programme today. Cal Duffy has been the producer. Chris Jacobs is the setup producer. He's also the producer and indeed the cameraman for the interview with Keir Starmer. So thank you to him. We went up to Staffordshire this week. Tommy Bateson has been the assistant producer. Jack Thrubban has been the technical operator. Luke Vincent and Davis Fang, the visual producers. Ayabel Ferez has been the video editor. And Phil Dave has been the weekend editor. I want to thank all of them for all they have done today. I am back tomorrow between 10 and 1, and I'm going to be talking to Priti Patel. She is the Shadow Foreign Secretary, about all that's going on in the Middle East, about getting those people back